I just couldn't do it.
Join us for conversations with retiring members of Congress, Saturday, starting at 9 Eastern on C-SPAN and cspan.org, or listen with the free C-SPAN radio app. California Governor Jerry Brown and former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg started planning a global climate conference after the Trump administration announced its intention last year to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement. Leaders from different sectors of society from around the world gathered in San Francisco in mid-September to talk about climate change. And among the speakers, Harrison Ford, Starbucks CEO Kevin Johnson, House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi, and the mayors of Paris, Warsaw, Houston, and San Francisco.
Please welcome our Master of Ceremonies, the Head of Communications for Bloomberg, Linda Douglas.
Well, hello and welcome to the Global Climate Action Summit. I am honored and humbled to be here in San Francisco with such extraordinary leaders from around the world. These are leaders from every sector, every industry, business, government, technology, philanthropy, entrepreneurs and artists, inventors, investors, scientists and students, all united by a common goal, the goal of protecting the people who live on our planet by confronting the existential threat of climate change. Now, we're off to an auspicious start. On Saturday, tens of thousands of citizens around the world marched to demand greater climate action to fulfill the promises made 3 years ago in Paris. Our task, as you well know, becomes more urgent every day. This summer, temperatures once again reached record highs. People are dying as wildfires burn their houses to the ground. They are starving as droughts destroy their crops. Hurricanes and other disasters have claimed thousands of lives, displacing entire populations, causing billions and billions of dollars in damage. And of course, at this very moment, Hurricane Florence is bearing down on the eastern seaboard, and already 1.5 million people have been told to evacuate their homes. Florence is set to bring 50% more rainfall due to human-induced climate change. Meanwhile, Tropical Storm Olivia is sweeping across Hawaii. And since the start of the hurricane season, this is an astonishing number, there have been 8 other named storms in the Atlantic and 14 more in the Pacific. And here in California, more than a dozen different wildfires are tearing across the state. So now is not the time for us to rest. This year marks the halfway point between the adoption of the Paris Agreement and 2020, a critical moment when carbon emissions must peak if we are to avoid the very worst effects of climate change. By mid-century, we must be carbon neutral. Now, these are ambitious goals, but the speakers that you're going to be hearing from over the next few days are working hard to achieve them. It won't be easy, and the solutions won't be perfect. We are learning by doing as we undertake a more radical shift in our global economy than has ever been previously undertaken. We will make mistakes, we're going to see some failures along the way, but we cannot and we will not back away from this fight. So all of you here today and all of you watching around the world are proof that we will not back away from this fight. Now please join me in welcoming someone who is heading the way right here in San Francisco, the newly elected mayor of San Francisco, London Breed.
Hello, everyone. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome all of you to San Francisco for this incredible Global Climate Action Summit. We are united here today to take action on the defining issue of our time, protecting our environment and fighting against climate change. This is an issue that is bigger than one city, one region, or country. The choices and commitments we make over the next few days and our sustained cooperation will determine if we are able to leave a better future for the next generation. California has long been a leader on climate action, and San Francisco has been at the forefront of those efforts. Since 1990, we have reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by 30% and cut our landfill disposal in half, all while growing our economy by 111%. We are proof that you can have a strong and growing economy while advancing ambitious environmental policies. We were the first major city to ban single-use plastic bags, and I pushed legislation to establish the nation's strongest styrofoam ban and enact drug take-back policies, which have kept 40 tons of prescription medication out of our bay and landfills. And our 100% renewable energy program, Clean Power SF, has reduced and resulted in greenhouse gas reductions equivalent to taking 17,000 cars off our roads. By the year 2030, we are committing to 4 major initiatives here in San Francisco: cutting our landfill waste in half, decarbonizing all new buildings, achieving 100% renewable energy, and continuing to issue more green bonds to finance critical infrastructure that's desperately needed to combat climate change. Today, thank you. Today, I ask you to join us. The impacts of climate change are not constrained by borders, and our actions shouldn't be either. Let's send the world a bold message of action, unity, and determination. Together, we can go further to protect our planet and our people for generations to come. Thank you all so much for being here, and enjoy your time in San Francisco.
It's been said that if we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. To gain a fresh perspective, to seek a new vantage point, to walk in another's shoes, we have to first be willing to change our minds.
I really wish that everyone could see the world the way that I've had a chance to see it.
We all know that people don't change, right? But wait, some do. Astronauts are the chosen few of us who know what it's like to survive without the basic but vital compass our planet provides. Their reward? A sneak peek at the big picture.
When you're floating above the Earth, you see many different examples of how our desire for natural resources is changing the planet, and not always in a good way.
Right now, humans are pumping CO2 into our atmosphere, and there isn't enough time for the Earth's air conditioning system to correct the problem.
Launched into space at over 17,000 miles per hour, they look down and discover how rare, how delicate, how perfectly calibrated the Earth really is.
Of all the changes that we're making to the Earth, I think it's changes to the atmosphere that we should be the most worried about.
The planet is getting hotter. How much hotter? That depends on us.
Those who have touched the void return with a global passport. Not an American, a Canadian, a Russian. An Earthling.
Our rock, our planet, is important to us. It's special and it's unique because it's our home.
We're all crewmates on the same ship.
Now that's a new perspective. How connected and accountable we are to each other. And what a responsibility we have to take care of the only place any of us here will ever live.
We can get a lot smarter because we can learn a lot more from the previous generations.
When I was on the space station looking back at the planet, it gave me a profound appreciation in what we take for granted.
We may not all have the luxury of observing our world from among the stars, but a day is coming when the void of space may seem like a more hospitable option than a planet at war with itself and with us. Fortune may favor the bold, but wisdom seeks those who find power in humility.
It just really gives you a sense of how special this place is where we live.
So, do we have what it takes? Is it possible to give our astronauts an even better view from above? One that proves that here on the ground, we were bold, we were resolute, and we were willing? Willing not only to change our minds, but to change our world for the better. I'm Robert Redford. Welcome to the Global Climate Action Summit.
Well, the view from space helps us understand the magnitude of the challenge that we are up against. But while our planet looks peaceful from above, for people in many parts of the world, climate change is a daily reality that threatens their lives and threatens their way of life. The people you're about to hear from now know this better than almost anyone because they have seen the devastating effects firsthand. They know what's at stake, and they know what it will take to meet the challenges head on. Our first speaker is a pioneer, the first female Prime Minister of Barbados. She is on the front lines of the fight to save her country and other island nations from the devastation of climate change. Please welcome Prime Minister Mia Mottley.
Good morning, everyone. The very existence of my island nation and that of my brothers and sisters in the Caribbean, their nations, is threatened as we speak today. I almost didn't make it here today. Indeed, as we speak, Tropical Storm Isaac is landing upon Dominica, St. Lucia, Guadeloupe, and Martinique. This is the fourth storm or hurricane in 3 years that is hitting Dominica as we speak. Barbados escaped the ravages of the 2017 hurricane season, the costliest on record in the Caribbean. A season with multiple Category 5 hurricanes in the same year. Unprecedented. It caused the utter devastation and complete evacuation of an island that has been inhabited for thousands of years. I refer to Barbuda. Unprecedented. And that's at 1 degree of warming. The world is currently on a path to well over 3 degrees of warming by the time a child born today reaches old age, even if the countries meet the commitments made in the first round of the nationally determined contributions. We were lucky in 2017, Barbados that is. We were lucky today. But is it fair and is it equitable that the livelihoods of our people are dependent now upon us staying lucky? Even if we avoid an extreme weather event, our ports, our hotels, our restaurants, our electricity generating stations, our main hospital, the only one, along with the majority of our other coastal infrastructure, are threatened by the insidious and accelerating rate of sea level rise. Coral reefs, our greatest economic asset after our human capital, are already dying. Things that I saw as a child, cobblers, sea eggs, we no longer see. Our reefs will dissolve as the oceans become more acidic. And even as we do that, we are facing and confronting daily now, as I speak, the threat of sargassum weed, which threatens the livelihood of our hotels, our workers, and our coasts. Our dry seasons are getting longer. Our droughts are more common. 3 years ago, 7 of the 11 parishes in my nation had difficulty accessing water. Access to fresh water is becoming a constraint on further economic development for a country that is already defined as water-stressed. Indeed, the cost of desalination water is more than 10 times that of our current cost of water, and we seek to do so as the 3rd most indebted country in the entire world. Dengue, chikungunya, and Zika-bearing mosquitoes are breeding faster and regrettably biting more people. Barbados, like many other countries around the world, is already experiencing the adverse impacts of climate change. And we are not content to wait for others to act. Barbados is a proud nation, long respected for punching way above its weight. We have been a world leader in solar hot water technology for almost 50 years, and now we intend to be one of the first examples of how carbon neutrality and climate resilience can be achieved across an entire economy. We intend to reassert ourselves on every international front we can engage to combat climate change, because we are in a fight for our own existence. Indeed, it is for that reason that we have set 2030 as the target for us to have a fossil fuel-free economy. The world has lost, all of us, have lost momentum since Paris in 2015. And although the rate of increase has slowed, we've not yet peaked our global emissions. But we must do so by 2020. We really cannot afford to wait any longer. There's much work to be done. An affordable and predictable climate finance, believe you me, is greatly needed, especially for small island states whose vulnerability is in front of you today as I speak. The Green Climate Fund must be adequately replenished, for it is our only hope in many instances. And access to these funds need to be streamlined. Our country, Barbados, is graduated from borrowing from the World Bank because we are deemed to be a middle-income country because of our per capita income. And yet, had that hurricane hit us today, our conversation and our reality would be completely different. But we relish simply to wallow in definitions made in rooms thousands of miles away from our reality. The agreements and goals that arose out of the week in Paris cannot be forgotten or cast aside. Not anymore. The next round of nationally determined contributions will seal our fate, for better or for worse. And to the citizens of the world I speak now, not to the governments. This is our battle. You see the evidence before our very eyes. We see it, we feel it. We don't have the power to change the small things that we do, always. But there's some things that we can change. We can change how we save water. We can turn off the tap each time we brush our teeth. We can change how we save energy. We can turn off the lights and the air conditioners as we leave rooms. We can change our oceans and save our oceans by ensuring that that which we put in it is not to pollute it, like straws and plastics. And if each one does this, then we can save our world, because many hands make light work. With the technology today, we can see each other whenever and wherever we choose, across borders, across regions, across races. For our climate knows no boundaries and respects no class, but it will respect numbers, as politicians do. It will respect numbers acting in concert. It will respect thousands and millions of people acting together, not just to change our minds, but to transform how we live, to save our world. I look to everyone in this room to act, but I look to everyone who hears my voice to act. For my country, for our region, for our island nations in the Caribbean and the Pacific, for vulnerable communities everywhere. Our future and the future of generations yet to come is at stake. And if we wait any longer, it will be far too late to save it. My friends across the world, the time for talk is past. This is truly the time for action. Not just the action of leaders and governments, but the actions of you and you and you and you and you and me. Thank you. Blessings.
Please welcome Dana Tizia-Tram and Francisca Oliveira de Lima Costa.
Olá a todos, é um prazer imenso estar aqui. Eu estou aqui trazendo a voz dos povos indígenas do mundo. Aqueles que não puderam estar aqui hoje presente nessa conferência tão importante, com tanta responsabilidade para com cada um de nós. Quero dizer a todos que nós, povos indígenas, sempre cuidamos da floresta. Se hoje existe floresta em pé, floresta tropical no mundo, é porque nós, povos indígenas, sempre cuidamos da floresta. Porque nós acreditamos que a floresta, ela é tudo para nós. E eu vim trazer um recado que se o homem não repensar o seu jeito de usar a terra, de usar a floresta, com as suas ambições, nós vamos sofrer muito ainda. O problema das mudanças do clima não é um problema só dos povos indígenas, do rico, do pobre, do grande, do pequeno. É um problema nosso, que nós vamos ter que enfrentar esse grande desafio. E aqui nós precisamos sair com compromisso firmado, com parceria séria, e incluir os povos indígenas nessa pauta, porque quem cuida da floresta somos nós que estamos lá, a população tradicional, quem estamos cuidando da floresta para o planeta, para o clima e para o mundo. O mundo está doente, mas ainda tem solução, se nós, o homem como um todo, puder repensar o jeito de usar a floresta. Vocês precisam olhar para os povos indígenas. Nós, povos indígenas, não podemos aparecer aqui só para fazer uma fala bonita, mas na prática as coisas têm que acontecer de verdade, porque nós estamos ajudando, nós estamos lá na ponta, mas nós é quem sofre as consequências muito mais do que vocês, com a perca da alimentação, com as mudanças do tempo, que vocês chamam as mudanças do clima, nós chamamos mudanças do tempo, mudanças de calendário. Nós precisamos unir força, porque está acontecendo isso, foi o próprio homem que criou. O homem criou esse dano. Empreendimento cria impacto. Grandes hidrelétricas, estrada, que vocês acham que é desenvolvimento, entre aspas, para nós é destruimento, é destruir a nossa floresta, a nossa vida. Então, eu trouxe essa mensagem em nome dos povos indígenas, com muita responsabilidade, e aqui fazendo um apelo para todos nós, porque todos nós estamos sofrendo as consequências e vamos sofrer ainda mais se nós não sairmos daqui com esse compromisso firmado e botar na prática para acontecer as coisas que nós estamos firmando aqui. Era isso que eu queria trazer, essa mensagem em nome dos povos indígenas do mundo.
Bangwinzi Shilaknai. My name is Dana Tija Tram, Bundak Wichin from Old Crow, 80 miles north of the Arctic Circle. My people's oral history, stretching back over 28,000 years, teaches us that we are intrinsically tied to the land, the air, waters, and animals. Today, the rights of my people to continue our ways of life are in jeopardy as never before. We face the dual connected threats of climate change and the oil drilling that fuels it. Our sensitive region is warming twice as fast as the rest of the planet. The permafrost under our feet is melting while oil companies pump chemicals into it to prolong their operations. As it warms, the permafrost releases earth-altering amounts of methane and mercury. Now the sacred lands of my people, the pristine calving grounds of the largest land animal migration left on Earth, the porcupine caribou herd, are being eminently threatened by the same industry responsible for this warming. Without consulting us, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is slated to endure intensive seismic exploration beginning this winter as the first step in wholesale oil and gas development. Even the weight of the vehicles scar this sensitive landscape beyond recognition. These lands and waters are our very bodies. The caribou and migrating animals, our lifeblood. My people are committed to a future where fossil fuels do not ruin our Earth. In my village, we are constructing a solar farm of 2,000 panels, the largest such project in the Arctic North. This is just the beginning in reestablishing our ancient balance with our lands through sustainable technologies. But we cannot do this alone. The world must understand that none of us are separated from this planet, each other, or what is happening today. Respect for Indigenous rights is key to stemming and reversing climate change. That the disregard of our people is the disregard of this planet and even themselves. These are the teachings of my ancestors and elders, people who still remember these ancient truths. And for that, I give you thanks for listening today. Masit Cho.
Please welcome Johan Rockström and Christiana Figueres.
Hello, I'm Christiana Figueres, and this is my very good friend, Johan Rockström. We're here not only to again welcome you to the Global Climate Action Summit, but we're here to tell you a story. It is a story of the journey that we're already on of exponential transformation, already evolving right there in front of us. However, before we start the story, why don't you tell us why is exponential transformation actually necessary, Johan?
It starts with the big picture. After 50 years of rising human pressures on Earth, we have reached a saturation point. We reached a point in 2018 where Mother Earth is sending social and economic invoices in the form of extreme events across the entire world, right as we speak, seeing in the front of us, causing tremendous impacts across the entire planet. The scientific message is very clear. Things are changing faster than we had predicted. The unprecedented, the largest ever observed forest fires in California, all the way to forest fires, droughts, and water scarcity and tropical heat, even in the Arctic, most likely connected to the slowdown of the Arctic vortex caused by the amplified melting of Arctic ice, influencing the jet stream, which is causing and locking high-pressure temperatures in Northern Europe, all the way to the droughts and temperature rise in Australia, leading to floods in Pakistan, the unprecedented floods in Kerala, with a need to reinvest in the entire state, all the way to unprecedented events from floods, droughts across the entire planet. We see the impacts in terms of warming oceans that are absorbing so much of our impacts, with now coral bleaching, acidification across all oceans on the planet, with 30% of the Great Barrier Reef, the world's largest coral reef system, having crossed an irreversible tipping points. This is the big picture that we're seeing in front of us today. But the even bigger picture is our 100-year journey. A 100-year journey where what was normal 100 years back and what was then the extreme events is now becoming our new normal, where we're seeing across all continents the rising temperatures leading to very significant impacts across the entire social and economic fabric that we all depend on. In fact, can you believe it? We've now reached 1 degree Celsius warming on planet Earth, the highest temperature on Earth since the last ice age. We are at the point, at the edge, where we need to start transformations. But there's an even bigger picture, which is the rising scientific evidence that the Earth system has only stayed below 2 degrees so far, thanks to the resilience of the Earth system. We have 50% of our greenhouse gas emissions taken up in oceans and land. Earth remains still our best friend, but we're learning that there are tipping points all the way from the risk of losing methane from thawing permafrost to the degradation of the jet stream, the thermohaline, whole energy exchange in the oceans. And we have so much evidence today that these tipping points are what regulates our ability to have what we so much depend on, a self-cooling planet, and avoiding crossing a tipping point when Earth would potentially move irreversibly towards a self-amplifying warming temperature. Just a few months back, we summarized this science from all the tipping points we have, from the risk of the Amazon rainforest flipping over irreversibly to become a savanna, showing that already at 2 degrees Celsius, we may be crossing a planetary threshold where we could enter an irreversible journey towards a hothouse Earth.
So, Johan, are we condemned to a hothouse Earth?
Well, the good news is that Earth remains resilient. It's still dominated by self-cooling feedbacks, despite our unsustainable behavior across all sectors in society. So we still have the opportunity of transforming towards a decarbonized future well below 2 degrees Celsius, aiming at 1.5. The Paris Agreement has unprecedented scientific support. The pathway we need to follow in translating Paris is very clear. We need to bend the curve of emissions no later than 2020, in 2 years' time, and then following a pace of decarbonization, roughly a 6-7% reduction in emissions every year, which translates to a Gordon Moore type innovation pathway that we've called the global carbon law. If we can cut emissions by half every decade, we can take us to Paris, and that this is the transformation pathway that can take us to the decarbonized world economy by 2050. We need to transform the food system from being the single largest source of emissions to becoming a single largest sink of emissions, an agricultural revolution. We need, whether we like it or not, we need to recognize the need to have carbon capture and storage and biological capture and storage, but we also need to maintain the carbon sinks in natural ecosystems. And all of this, dear friends, if we can decarbonize according to the carbon law, transform food systems, keep resilient ecosystems, we have a 66% chance of staying under 2 degrees Celsius. This is a global transformation. It is an exponential journey.
So let's just understand what exponential actually means, because frankly, we're not used to thinking exponentially, right? So if I take more or less 37 steps in a linear fashion, that will be the length of this fantastic stage, more or less. 37 steps linearly. Now, if we think about these steps in exponential fashion, and we think actually we're going to be exponential by 2, so then we would take 1 step, then 2, then 4, then 8, then 16, then 32. We get the picture, right? You can do the math as well as I. Well, you have fundamentally different results. So if we start here today, and we take 20 exponential steps, we will be in LA. If we take 23 exponential steps, we will be in New York. If we take 26, we will be back in LA because we have gone all around the planet. If we take 30 exponential steps, we will be on the moon. And if we take 37, we will be on Mars. That is the difference between linear and exponential. That is the difference between linear progress and exponential progress when we think about climate change. So from Mars, let's come back to Earth and see, are we actually on an exponential path? Well, Johan and I would like today to put forward that we actually are on an exponential path, at least in some sectors. Let's begin with what we have seen in renewable energy. There we have definitely seen 10 years ago, let's be frank, renewable energy was a boutique operation. But now with the growth of both solar and wind, we have gone to a doubling of renewable energy every 5.5 years. That means if we continue that trend, exponential trend, we will actually be pretty safely, even discounting for all the challenges that we're going to have, we're going to be pretty safely at 50% renewable energy by 2030. Something that would have been unthinkable just 10 years ago, and definitely the evidence for exponential progress. Now let's look to the latest exciting news that we all read in newspapers every day, which is what is happening in electric vehicles. Quite exciting. Frankly, 10 years ago, electric vehicles were science fiction. Now, we have every major car company already putting forward their electric models for all of their old internal combustion engine models, and we have a growing number of countries that are setting dates for banning the sale of new vehicles if they are internal combustion, i.e. regulating that all new vehicles will have to be electric. Currently, the uptick in electric vehicles is actually following market path. But once these policies come into effect, we will have electric vehicles in the market following an exponential path just through the combination of market forces and policies. Then we have, let's look at the green finance sector, a very exciting sector. Just on green bonds. Now let's remember that we know that in order to transform the global economy, we need to invest at least $1 trillion every year into green infrastructure. And just on green bonds, one of the financial instruments, where have we gone? We have gone from where we were, practically unheard of instrument, certainly 10 years ago, to now already an exponential curve, which if followed up until 2021, we will be at $1 trillion just with green bonds. Another exponential curve that we're beginning to see is the divestment movement. Started in 2013, and by now, we're already at $6 trillion with exponential curves to look forward to. And then carbon pricing, yet another financial instrument to accelerate low carbon economic growth. The going word on the street is that carbon pricing is not occurring. Not true. You can see how much is actually already occurring in certainly in terms of countries, but also in terms of coverage of greenhouse gases, with more news to come very soon. So across the green finance sector, with different instruments, with different takes, we are starting to see the exponential curve moving forward. That, of course, means that companies are now able to take science-based targets, and we have there, again, an uptick in companies taking science-based targets, which means zero net by 2050. And stay tuned for a very exciting announcement that will come today that will take us beyond where we are right now at this moment of 476 companies. All of this together means that countries are actually able to peak emissions. And by 2020, we know that we will have 53 countries who will have been able to peak their greenhouse gas emissions while increasing their GDP, i.e. we are beginning to disassociate the two curves of economic growth and GHG growth, which is exactly what is called for in the Paris Agreement. So, Johan,
Where are we heading?
I have to be frank with you. Hold on. I have to be frank with you because everything that I have said is all well and good, but it only covers a few sectors, right? So what happens with the other sectors?
Well, you know, it's almost like it puts us in a point of schizophrenia because there's never been reason to be so nervous as today, based on the scientific necessity, but there's never been so much reason to be hopeful given the exponential rise of journeys in the right direction that we're seeing. So when Hurricane Florence is now about to hit North Carolina, and we know that this is very likely actually associated, and it's an unnatural path due to the weakening of the jet stream, we also see all these positives. What we are releasing here today is for the first time the Exponential Climate Action Roadmap, building on the empirical evidence that you just presented, Christiana, and looking at the next 12 years. What is the roadmap and opportunity we have to cut emissions by half by 2030 over the next 12 years following the global carbon law that can take us to Paris? And this maps out with the best evidence we have the 30 solutions which are scalable, which are potentially beneficial both socially and economically across all sectors in society. This covers the whole transport, energy, buildings. It is a careful walkthrough of all the mapping that have been done from private sector, from policy, from countries around the world to see what is realistically achievable, wedge by wedge, scale by scale. And what we find is that, yes, we can reach 50% electricity coming from solar and wind by 2030 on the current trajectories. And most excitingly, perhaps, is that when we come at food consumption and land use, we even hear, which is the dark horse, as we all know, that the final battleground, whether we'll reach Paris, is not only about decarbonizing the energy system, it's also about a transformation to sustainable and healthy food systems. And then even here, the solutions are in place. We have the technologies and we can succeed. Minimizing food waste, investing in sustainable intensification, recycling resources, getting new energy balances in our ecosystem management and landscapes. This just shows that we are on path to success.
So to support this transformation, this exponential transformation, as you know, all nations came together in 2015 in Paris and agreed to a common path toward the decarbonization of the global economy. We, in the meantime, have taken that path and we are building the moments between now and 2020 to ensure that we're keeping track of the exponential progress that we're seeing and, in fact, increasing that exponential progress. But 2020 is only 2 minutes from now. And over the next few months, in preparation for 2020, when countries must come together again to assess what they have been able to do, what the private sector has done, what investment has done, what technologies have moved forward, they will have to come together to the table to step up their national ambition once again, because there is in the Paris Agreement a 5-year cycle, which we call the ratchet mechanism, in which every 5 years countries need to upgrade and update their aspirations based on the reality that they see and the projections that they believe are going to be possible. 2020 is the year, the first year in which these countries must come to the table and increase the ambition, but it is also the year in which science has told us it is the very last moment that we have to actually be able to bend the curve of emissions, which currently is still increasing, bend the curve of greenhouse gas emissions, and begin the radical descent that we must follow in order to stay safely under 2 degrees. So we have heard today from Johan that this exponential transformation is necessary. We have seen that at least in some sectors, it is already exponential. And we have just heard from Johan that it is achievable. The moment has come to move from knowing that it is achievable to actually achieving it. And that is what we're gathered here to do over these 2 days. You have been invited to a summit. It is a summit, but it is not only a summit. This is actually an invitation for all of you to join the journey of exponential transformation, for you to assess where are you on that exponential curve, how can you contribute to the next uptick, and how can you reach out to everyone else, to peers, to colleagues, to supply chain, to encourage them to change their mindset from linear to exponential. Because the world, the future of the world, is one that we must co-create based on radical collaboration among all of us. Because the consequences of either doing so or not doing so are not just for us, they are for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
As host mayor of the 2015 Paris Agreement, she helped bring together leaders from cities, states, business, and civil society to strengthen that historic deal. Today, she represents not only her own city of Paris, but a coalition of 96 cities that are home to 700 million people and 1/4 of the global economy. Please welcome Mayor Anne Hidalgo.
Let me tell you a story. The story of a European citizen, mother of 3, and mayor of one of the biggest cities in the world, who recently brought a case before the European Court to defend the right of her fellow citizens to breathe. It all started in 2015 with the Dieselgate, a case of fraud that led the European Commission to review an environment law to give a sort of license to pollute. The origin of this case, the manipulation of results by a major car maker to pass the test of compliance to pollution standards. Instead of punishing the cheaters, Europe only changed the rules. As mayor of Paris, fighting to ensure that my city breathes, I could not allow that. Against the advice of many people, but with the support of thousands of citizens and joined by my colleagues, the mayor of Brussels and Madrid, I decided to challenge the Commission decision. I was then told that in order to do so, I needed to be directly and personally affected. Directly and personally affected. As a mayor, I'm directly and personally affected by air pollution. I am because, as a mayor, it is my responsibility to protect the citizens. I always keep in mind the mandate they gave me. I act on behalf of Parisians with their trust and defending their interests. I am directly and personally affected when hospitals report to me an increasing number of children suffering from asthma. I'm directly and personally affected when doctors challenge me on air pollution, which is causing new cancers every year. I'm directly and personally affected when I witness that the most vulnerable ones are strongly impacted by climate change, therefore increasing inequalities. I am directly and personally affected because I don't want to face my children one day when they ask me, "Why didn't you do anything?" It is an emergency. We will not die from pollution tomorrow. We are already dying today. I don't know what the ruling of the European Court will be. I'm waiting for the decision. I don't know if we'll lean toward the truth or the lies, the future of the past, citizen or lobbies. But I know that we, mayors, dear friends, dear colleague, governor, dear Governor Brown, local governments, we are directly and personally affected. We are legitimate to act, for it is the question of health. We are best placed to defend them and to enable them to breathe. The Paris Agreement is an invitation to do so. Our house is burning and we look elsewhere. This announcement was made by former President Chirac at the opening of the Earth Summit in 2002. Our house is burning now, literally. It is about time to act. Thank you for your attention.
Please welcome anchor and executive producer, Bloomberg Technology, Emily Chang.
Hi, everyone. That's better. Thank you so much for being here today. We all know that mitigating climate change has to be a national priority, and more often than not, the real work that we're seeing is being done from the ground up, whether it's cities or states or businesses or civil society advocating for action, implementing policies, making big investments. So even where national leadership may be falling short, we've got champions leading the fight on the ground to fulfill the promises that were made in Paris, and we are here to celebrate their actions. So I'm pleased to introduce some of those leaders right now. We've got the governor of New Jersey, Phil Murphy, who's demonstrated the power that states can have as climate actors. He has recommitted to the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative and put the state on track towards 100% clean energy by 2050. Yeah. Hanna Gronkiewicz-Waltz became mayor of Warsaw in 2006, and since that time, she has championed new programs to make Warsaw a green metropolis, including revamping their transportation network. And Poland, of course, is going to be the host of COP24 this December. I know a lot of you will be there. It is not just about state and local governments leading the charge. They're often challenged to set even bigger goals by civil society organizations like Oxfam International. To keep the rest of us on track, we have Winnie Byanyima, Oxfam's executive director, who is a renowned expert on the intersection of climate change, gender, and poverty. She also has some fascinating on-the-ground stories that she will be sharing with us. And companies around the world are starting to understand the importance of these issues too and take action. So really excited to have Kevin Johnson here, the CEO of Starbucks. He was on the board for 10 years. He's been CEO since last year, and he's led, as many of you know, some really bold commitments to social impact, including the recent announcement that Starbucks will eliminate the waste and hazard of plastic straws globally by 2020. My mom, your biggest strawberry acai drinker, is still getting used to this, but she's on board. And last but not least, we've got one of the biggest players who led the negotiation in Paris on behalf of the Obama White House, Brian Deese. He's now the head of BlackRock's Sustainable Investing Group. He leads their efforts to engage on socially conscious investments and aligning that with their portfolio and values. So the challenges may be different for all of these parties, but the goal is the same, and that is decarbonization.
Hello, Brian.
All right. So Brian, I thought I would start with you. Since you were there on the ground in Paris, leading, an important player in leading the negotiations for the Obama administration. What was your reaction to the current administration pulling out, and what do you think the real impact of that has been?
Well, I think that there is a certain physics to politics. And so, as inexplicable as that decision was, I think for people around the world, and particularly for people who worked closely on it, what I think is equally or more notable is that action has had an equal and opposite reaction. You've seen that by countries around the world. If you took us back to Paris and you asked us, where would we be 2.5 years in with this sort of global compact on climate change, if you could predict the unexpected events like Brexit and like the election in the United States? I think you look at where we are today and be quite optimistic that every country, every major economy outside the United States has not only recommitted to the Paris Agreement, but committed to the idea that what Paris stood for is irreversible. We see the action that's happening at the state and local level. And we see that in the investing world as well. Asset owners in the last 18 months have increasingly been interested in these set of issues. And there's an irony that, in fact, I think it took the Trump administration to really bring a unifying force to the American private sector to be in favor of climate action. And so I think those are it's the equal and opposite reaction that I tend to focus on.
So let's talk about the galvanization, the positive side of the galvanization of that. I'd like to hear from all of you what you think your biggest accomplishment has been since Paris. So Governor Murphy, I'll start with you.
First of all, thrilled to be here. I want to thank Governor Brown and the hosts for this extraordinary convening. I succeeded a guy who was anti-climate policy, and we are obviously in the midst, as Brian has said, of an administration which is historically bad. So New Jersey's a pretty proud progressive state. So we've taken, I have to say I had a conversation with Governor Brown right after I got elected to get advice, and we talked about climate mostly. And I said to him on the call, I wanted New Jersey to be the California of the East Coast. And one of my Jersey buddies showing great Jersey attitude said, Murph, you got to go stronger. You got to say we're going to succeed so much. California is going to be the Jersey of the West Coast. But we have a vision for a 100% clean energy economy by the year 2050. A big piece of that is offshore wind. And if you said to me, what's the one thing that I'd really love to sort of anchor with you today, is we've laid out a vision for 3,500 megawatts offshore by 2030 in offshore wind. New Jersey's really well situated, not just the wind currents, but also the plates and the depths. And I'm proud to say that our Board of Public Utilities this coming Monday is going to consider the first round of solicitations for 1,100 megawatts. So this is actually going to happen. And I'm going to ask them to put in place, again, announcing today in the year 2020 and 2022, the incremental in each year's case, 1,200 megawatts, another 1,200 megawatts. So this is going to happen. So it's not just wind, it's solar, it's community solar, it's a huge environmental justice program, and boy, all of this creates jobs and makes us healthier and gives us better lives.
All right. Mayor Gronkiewicz, cities have a huge role to play here. Talk to us about the role that Warsaw is playing, and you also have something to announce today.
I think that in the case of Central Europe, especially these countries which are after communist period, we started quite late in comparison to the developed world, because I can say that in realistic terms we started to think and to elaborate and to face the challenge of change of climate when we became the member of the EU, which in the case of Poland is 2004. And I think that the cities and the mayors, they play a very important role. I should confess that even stronger than the government, and we do our job. What I mean by doing our job, I mean we change the buses, we introduce electric buses, we change the the tramways, we are constructing subways. It's the case of Warsaw. Because of different history, as I mentioned already in the beginning, we started a little bit late. But we are very much determined, and what is the most important in our case, I think, is the education and the awareness of the subject of the issue. So you have to educate the schools, the children, students, they should know what's going about, yes? Fortunately, in our case, we have education on the high level. This was the one thing which was important in the previous system and very much highlighted. And so it's going not so bad. But what is also important, we coordinate different stakeholders. These are also universities, business. We have a special arrangement with the Polytechnic School in Warsaw, with Warsaw Economic School. We are working at the moment for the air pollution monitoring. So this is an example. What is also very important, these different events, and I can show. We have, for example, Partnership for Climate. We have Picnic with Climate. Many people come. Also, and because they like picnic, yes. So you have to find a way to the people, to the public. Also, Energy Days, and also annual European Mobility Week. And I'm always doing this week check by the media if I go by bus, if I go by train, if I go by car. So this is the action which we undertake, just to make people more and more aware with the issue. And but what is for us important, apart from our task and activity among our committees? I give you one quick example. For example, we have so-called participatory budgets. It means people, they get some money, they can do what they want. And now they decided that this one of the group in one district, that they would like to have more monitoring of air pollution. So it was their own decision. For us, it's also important the cooperation in the international cooperation, because we are active in C14, ICLEI, in Euro cities, and we share our knowledge with other, of course, capital cities, not only capital cities, but we participate, of course, in Paris, in Chicago, in Berlin, London, Lisbon, Milan. This is for us very helpful.
Now, Winnie, you do a lot of your work in the Global South, where a large percentage of global emissions are projected, and I'm wondering if you can share with us some of the dangerous and disastrous impacts you are seeing on the ground, and talk about what we can do to act more aggressively.
Well, thanks, Emily. And first, to thank Governor Brown for this invitation to join this panel on behalf of Global Civil Society, on behalf of Oxfam, my organization. You know, climate change is a political challenge, not a technical challenge. That's my starting point. Why? It's an issue of justice. Thank you. It's an issue of justice and fairness. If I think about my uncle, who lives in a village in Uganda and is a farmer, it would take him 129 years to emit the same amount of carbon dioxide as an average American citizen emits in 1 year. 129 years. So, the climate crisis was caused by the emissions of rich people, but it is poor people who are hit hardest. And so, what excites me is really that we're seeing that in spite of that, the pendulum of climate action is swinging towards developing countries. They are not just sitting down watching, they are acting. Here are some examples. The Climate Vulnerable Forum, 50 countries, poorest countries, least developed countries, small islands, have committed to have 100% renewable energy by 2050. This is their commitment. They are holding a virtual climate summit in November. That's leadership. China and India today, their investment in renewable energies is the highest world over and is rising fastest. That's China and India. South Africa is among the top 10 countries that are deploying utility-scale solar power. South Africa. So that's leadership. And so I'm optimistic, but I also know, as the scientist said here, that we need to do more. It's simply not enough. And that's why we at Oxfam are now calling for an end to the use of coal worldwide. Yes. We are saying that there shouldn't be another coal plant installed in the world today, and that the existing ones should be phased out as fast as possible. That's our position on coal. We've done an estimate, my last point, we've estimated that for every dollar invested in coal in Asia, that dollar will cause $10 of climate change damage in that region alone. Yeah. So what do you call that? You call it economics of self-harm. We can't do that. So we're calling for the end of coal. We're excited about the momentum that has been generated because climate change is a political issue. It's an issue of people power. We need people power, and that's why we're so excited by the marches.
So, Kevin, Starbucks has a lot of constituencies. Obviously, you've got coffee growers, you've got customers who love their straws, you've got shareholders. How do you balance where to invest your time, your energy, and your money towards sustainability, given that you are a for-profit company with all of these obligations?
Well, first of all, it's a privilege to be here today. And as you point out, what would a publicly traded company like Starbucks be doing at a conference like this? Well, certainly, as we've grown over the decades, we now have nearly 29,000 Starbucks stores in 78 countries, over 330,000 Starbucks partners who proudly wear the green apron, serving 100 million customers a week. And we are a company that, in the fabric of our mission, our culture, and our values, is the belief that the pursuit of profit is not in conflict with the pursuit of doing good. We are a company that started a journey years ago where one of our social impact pillars is sustainability. And we're a company that has put a stake in the ground that is working to make coffee the first sustainable agricultural product in the world. We're doing that in partnership. We're doing that in partnership with the public sector and with NGOs like Conservation International. And we're working on behalf of coffee farmers around the world to make coffee a sustainable agricultural product. We've extended that to provide greener cups in our stores. And we've made announcements. We introduced a recyclable cup years ago, but we realized that many municipalities can't afford or don't have the facilities to recycle all those cups. And so earlier this year, we announced the Greener Cup Challenge in partnership with the World Wildlife Foundation and the work that we're doing in partnership with closed loop partners to find new solutions, innovative solutions that we will open source to all. We then built upon that over the years where we have built more LEED stores than any other business in the world. We've woven LEED criteria into our store development process, and we've taken it not just within the United States, but we've taken it around the world. And so you put all that together, sustainability is one of the pillars of our social impact agenda. And we're here today to announce how we're going to extend our commitment even further.
Tell us.
Well, today we're announcing that in addition to the journey that we've been on, we now have launched what we call a greener store framework. In addition to building stores with LEED criteria and LEED certification, we're now extending it to how we operate those stores. Things that really focus on renewable energy that's used in our stores, water stewardship, the things that we're doing to better manage and reduce waste. And it's all driven with the aspiration to be the #1 company in the world with a sustainable platform from origin, working with farmers, the entire supply chain, to the stores and the actual end product that we deliver. And so we're very excited about the opportunity that brings.
All right. Brian, as Kevin said, making money shouldn't be at odds with, creating a better planet for us and future generations. That said, do investors really value sustainability, and do you believe it actually is a competitive advantage? Can you make more money by investing sustainably or investing in sustainable efforts, or are those two things at odds?
So at BlackRock, we're an asset manager, which means our mission, our purpose is to protect and grow the value of our clients' assets, most of which are invested for the long term, and most of which are invested for long-term goals like retirement. And so our goal in that context is to look forward at risks and opportunities and be better at anticipating those on behalf of our clients. And in that context, the first point I would make, consistent with what Kevin said, is that sustainable investing is no longer a nice to do. It's no longer an exercise in trading value for values. And it's increasingly becoming core to that mission of providing a better future for the clients that we serve. I think that when we talk about climate change in particular, I think that in too many parts of the investing world, there has been this view that the risks of climate are real, but they are too long-term. They are too hard to measure. They are too uncertain to really build into an investment strategy. And I think that the second point I would make is that the facts and the data have well made that view obsolete. And so I think that the opportunity and the responsibility on all of us in the investing community is to up our game and to get better at understanding those risks, measuring those risks, pricing those risks, and then using them to deliver better outcomes. And at BlackRock, we're committed to doing our part on that front. And so we're doing a number of things. First, we engage directly with companies that have the most material risks associated with climate change. And we expect them to both disclose those risks and have a plan to address those. And we sent letters to 120 of those companies this year to ask them that the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure put out a framework. What are they doing to put that in practice in their own companies? Second, we can build in the cutting-edge physical risk data about climate change into our own investment processes. And we believe that the data and the science has accelerated to a point that we can provide a much clearer picture, not just at the city level or even the street level, but down to the individual structure level of what those risks are. And we can connect those back to the assets that we own, the securities that we own. That makes us better investors, but it also has the impact of driving change throughout the investment ecosystem, the insurance ecosystem, if we more effectively price those risks. And third, from an investment perspective, climate change is not just about risk. It's also about opportunity. You listen to what Kevin's doing. Kevin is finding commercial opportunities to try to reinforce the Starbucks purpose by putting his money where his mouth is and your company's money where your mouth is. And so we believe we can more effectively deliver for investors a holistic view of, are companies ready for this low carbon transition? Are they prepared to capture the opportunities as well as mitigate those risks? And then allow investors to align their capital with companies that are more prepared for the low carbon transition. They can do well by doing good. And the last thing that I would, the last thing that I would say is that ultimately, as an investor, the other big opportunity that we can't ignore is the capital needs to transition the world's infrastructure to a low-carbon world. That the energy infrastructure and the transportation infrastructure globally need to transition. And we at BlackRock we've invested $5 billion into renewable wind and solar assets, and we are committed to seeing the challenge of the capital that needs to flow, not just into wind and solar, but into the global low-carbon infrastructure transition. Seeing that challenge as an opportunity and stepping into that challenge and saying, how can we give investors the opportunity to invest in that transition in a way that will generate commercial returns, but that will help deploy capital into frontier economies and frontier technologies. And we're ready to step up and do that.
Good job.
Governor Murphy, we've got another hurricane barreling towards the East Coast. It took New Jersey a long time to recover from Hurricane Sandy, and there's a belief that climate change made the hurricane more powerful. There were big economic losses there. How do you see the clean energy economy that you are trying to build contributing to economic growth? This idea of doing well by doing good.
Yes. By the way, there's a fascinating discussion, and I think one reaction I'm having up here is that the likes of all of us will have never mattered more. Whether you're a governor, in my case, a mayor running one of the world's premier NGOs, a for-profit CEO, an investor, given what the hand we've been dealt, we will have never mattered more. I think 100 years from now, folks will look back and say the folks like the group gathered today, we changed history, and that's the reason why we've gathered here today. And there's a lot of myth busting. So you've got both in the corporate side and the investment side this question of you can do good or do well. That's also a reality in politics, that if you're for climate change, you must be against economic growth. And that's a myth that we must be vigilant in completely shattering, because in fact, it's a 1 + 1 = 3 opportunity. I mentioned in passing, this is a huge job creator, union jobs more often than not. You think through that offshore wind historic opportunity we have, that's thousands of jobs. That's direct input into our economic growth. You look at, we were having some of us a discussion earlier today, look at the health disparities that we have. Winnie made the very compelling point that the poorest among us pay the biggest price. If you look at rates of asthma in kids in Newark and Elizabeth, New Jersey, who have proximity to the big ports and the trucks that go in and out, and you look at the rates that are multiples of the rates elsewhere in our state or elsewhere in our country, and you can imagine a better future where you get that back into line. You have an enormous benefit, not just to those individuals, but to society more generally, or to disparities in life expectancy, which are shockingly wide depending on the communities in which you live. Again, if we can get at that collectively, that is a huge contributor, not just to society and those individuals, but to economic growth. So it's jobs, it's better health outcomes, it's a better quality of life, and this notion that you can either do good or do well, but you can't do both. We have to collectively commit that we're going to shatter that once and for all.
Now, clearly this is something that we're all going to do together, whether it's the investment community or the government or cities or civil society or corporations. So what is the one thing you will do, and I'll have our last three panelists here answer this question, how do you see committing to work together with other organizations, with other constituencies to get to this end goal that we all believe in?
I think that in the case of Warsaw, citizens are more educated than it was before, so they push us. They wanted to have everything immediately, but we don't have so money to do everything at the same moment. So, for example, we do different things which are the most important, and of course they are also sponsored by the EU with the EU funds, because EU offers the funds mainly for the environment, which is, I think, very positive and very important. So, for example, we have probably one of the most modern wastewater treatment plants, which was very costly because it was about $1 million, and half of this was sponsored by the EU. So if you come one day to Warsaw, I can show you. It's really the modern, because it's the newest, you know, and of course the standards had to be fulfilled. With the incinerator, which uses the energy from the waste, so it's very important for the environment. So we try to as I said, to combine and to gather together business and also research. We would like also to make energy efficient buildings as the city municipal housing. We are now we adopt the soon Warsaw standard building, which is at first it will be for the municipal, because we don't have a law which can enforce. As a city, we don't have government can do it, enforce the residential areas, which is not our own. I think what is also very important to preserve the green spaces. In Warsaw, we have about 30% is green. So we are lucky from this point of view. When you land, you can see from the plane, that's probably one of the most, except maybe Nordic countries, one of the most green capital city in this part of Europe. And what is very important, we have, of course, the river, and the other side of river, the so-called the right side. On the left side, you have different things which you can use, different kinds of facilities. It's I would say, modernized, but it's completely green, the other side of the river, and we can do your jogging, people bike, whatever you do. So this is very unusual. I remember one of the Asian group who visited us, they said, how much money did you spend to keep it? And in first, we were lucky we didn't change it, so it's very natural. So I think that this is the way how we try to do. And of course, what is very important in our case, as I mentioned in the beginning, is the transportation. For example, transportation is cheaper year after year, which is not the case in many countries, because we invested a lot. But now we reduce the price of the tickets. And it's the same, by the way, with water supply. I just wrote a letter and sent to the citizens that they will pay since now 14% less than last year's. This is the way how we manage.
We're out of time, so Winnie and Kevin, I want to give you the last word, but please keep it brief. How do you see collaborating with other constituencies to have the greatest impact? What do you see as the greatest opportunity to collaborate and also have a great impact?
Well, I think the most important thing to do for us in civil society, definitely, is to challenge the economic model that has resulted in climate change. Because climate change, it's one symptom of a broken economy. Extreme inequality is another symptom of a broken economy. We have an economy that obscures the cost of economic activity to the environment. And the same economy also hides the contributions of ordinary people, particularly women, of caring for children, caring for people, caring for the sick. That is also not counted in the economy. And we have an economy then that counts narrowly economic activity, leaves out the most important things like looking after environment, looking after people. I could say bluntly, if I were to put it bluntly, that this economy trashes the environment and trashes people, ordinary people, especially women. So for us, the most important thing will be to work with business people to look for alternative models that share value with ordinary people, that rely less on fossil fuels. It will be to work with governments and cities to look for ways to support ordinary, poor, vulnerable people to adapt to climate change. It will be about going on the streets and demonstrating people power so that politicians can organize our economies differently. So I hope you'll join us on the street. Wear a T-shirt and yeah, we all put on our T-shirts and go to that house. You know the one I mean.
Kevin, there's the challenge.
Look,
how does Starbucks
just
rise to it, and how should other companies?
I'll just build on Winnie's comments. I think, look, if you look at this problem on a global basis, it can be so overwhelming that it can become discouraging. If you look at this problem through, your silo, you could say, what can I do? The only way to look at this problem, in my opinion, is say, am I partnering with other like-minded public sector, NGOs, and businesses to make progress? And it is that progress, momentum will build momentum, and optimism is a force multiplier. And so the work we do in partnership with NGOs, with public sector, with other businesses to, around sustainability is the only way that I think we can solve this problem.
All right.
Well said.
Thank you to all of you for the work you're doing, for being here. Really appreciate you sharing your thoughts
Thank
today.
you.
Thank you.
Please welcome I.G. Patel Professor of Economics and Government at the London School of Economics, Lord Nicholas Stern.
Thank you. My argument is simple. The transition to the zero carbon economy is the inclusive growth story of the 21st century. Let me explain. The world economy must grow over the next 15 to 20 years in order to overcome poverty. To avoid dangerous climate change, that means implementing the Paris Agreement, emissions must peak as soon as possible and be cut by at least 30% in the next 15 years. Otherwise, we risk halting and reversing economic development and forcing hundreds of millions of people to move, with real risks of severe and extended conflict. Thus, it is clear that we need a new type of growth if we're to radically reduce carbon and move to net zero emissions as close to 2050 as possible. And we're in a hurry to establish this new type of growth because infrastructure will double in the next 15 years and the world economy will double in the next 20. We must not lock in old and dirty technologies. The good news, as we lay out in the new report by the New Climate Economy, is that the transition to the zero emissions economy is the growth story of this century. This is a still stronger statement than the case made in the Stern Review in 2006 that the costs of inaction exceed the costs of action. We can now see a bigger story, one of innovation, discovery, investment, and growth. And it's a much more attractive form of growth, with cities where we can move and breathe and ecosystems that are robust and fruitful. The report sets out what we must do in 5 key sectors: clean energy, smarter urban development, sustainable land use, wise water management, and the circular and resource-efficient economy. And it sets out the policies that can deliver both growth and the necessary emissions reductions. First, price carbon and mandate carbon disclosure. Second, accelerate investment in sustainable infrastructure. Third, foster private sector innovation. And fourth, ensure a just transition with people at the center. The benefits are many, as the graphic behind me shows, including not only stronger growth, but also 65 million jobs by 2030. That's what inclusive means, or one of the things that inclusive means. But delay is very dangerous. The new growth story is in our hands. Now is the time to decide, to act, and the time for leadership. But to get global results, we know that action has to happen from the ground up. That's the story of this summit. And to look at this in more detail, please welcome Director of Data-Driven Yale, Dr. Angel Xu. Thank you very much.
It's not just national governments that are clamoring for this kind of future. Non-state actors, cities, states, and regions, and companies are setting their sights just as high, and often even higher. Many cities and companies have pledged to limit their emissions to support the goals of the Paris Agreement. Added all together, our latest findings show that these thousands of city, state, and region and company pledges are leading to measurable emissions reductions in the order of 1.5 to 2.2 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent over national government policies in 2030. This is roughly equivalent to double Canada's yearly total emissions. But they can't just deliver on the Paris goals alone. We need everyone working together, from cities, states, and regions, and companies alongside countries. Reaching this full potential of emissions reductions is possible if all of these actors achieve their ambitious reduction goals across all sectors. Global emissions could fall by 1/3 in 2030, putting the Paris Agreement goals closer within reach. Particularly in the land use and the non-energy sectors, there is so much untapped potential that we could harness. So the next step is to scale up our commitments and enlist the full support of national governments. Every one of us has a play to make these commitments a reality. Thank you.
Well, as you've just heard, climate change presents not only a threat, but an opportunity to invigorate our societies and economies at a global scale. As we've seen proof of the critical role that states and regions and cities and businesses and investors and citizens will all play in the push for a climate-safe future. And now in the next segment, we're going to hear about some of the areas where progress is being made. And to kick us off, let's hear from a special guest. Now, this guest is a hero on the silver screen and also a hero in the fight against climate change.
I'm doing this video right here in Budapest. As a matter of fact, Hero Square. And the reason for this is very simple, because you are heroes, environmental heroes. The legislature #1 in California for passing SB 100. The governor of California, Jerry Brown, for signing SB 100. And all of you are heroes because you're fighting for a clean environment, for a clean world, and a green world. I love that. Now, I'm doing here a science fiction movie, and that's why I cannot be with you. I'm doing Terminator 6. But what you are doing is not science fiction. I only play a hero here, but you are the true action heroes. Hasta la vista, baby.
And our thanks to Arnold Schwarzenegger. Well, there are lots of ways to be a hero in the fight against climate change. And one of the big ones is driving the transition away from fossil fuels. Coal has powered the world, but now there are cleaner and healthier fuels to provide energy for the country and for the world. Here's a case in point, an interesting case in point. Last year, the Kentucky Coal Mining Museum did something unexpected. It switched to solar power. Not for political reasons, but to save money. So if we take the right steps now, we will hear many more stories like this in the years to come. The Powering Past Coal Alliance is working to ensure that we do hear many more of these good news stories. The Alliance represents over 50 countries, regions, and businesses working to move us all beyond fossil fuels for good. And now it's my pleasure to introduce some of the people who are working to power past coal. Shane Rattenberry, the Minister for Climate Change and Sustainability of the Australia Capital Territory, Catherine McKenna, the Canadian Minister of Environment and Climate Change, and the UK's Special Representative for Climate Change, Nick Bridges.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Around the world, we burn over 5 billion tonnes of coal every year. For every tonne of coal we burn, we release over 2.5 tonnes of carbon dioxide, which gets trapped in our atmosphere, warming the planet. Burning coal releases hazardous pollutants and toxic chemicals, black carbon and sulphides that cause asthma and cardiovascular disease, waste that turns streams as acidic as vinegar. Coal causes over 800,000 premature deaths worldwide every year. Recognising these impacts, the Powering Past Coal Alliance was created to envision a way forward beyond coal. In the Australian Capital Territory, where I am the Minister for Climate Change and Sustainability, we are providing an example of moving beyond coal. We are on track to achieve 100% renewable electricity by 2020 in just 18 months' time. We are proof positive that the switch to renewables can happen now. Thank you. Yes. Today I am pleased to announce that the Australian Capital Territory, along with 9 other additional jurisdictions, are joining the Powering Past Coal Alliance. I would like to particularly acknowledge the climate leadership of Canada and the United Kingdom through the development of this alliance. The mission of the alliance is to replace coal power with renewable energy sources. In partnership with Bloomberg Philanthropies, we're developing case studies and best practice to guide the transition. And we're bringing together governments, businesses and other partners to help organisations accelerate this change. Today I'm excited to announce the new members of our coalition: Wales, Connecticut, Hawaii, New York State, Minnesota, the Balearic Islands, and the cities of Rotterdam, Honolulu, and Los Angeles. Give them all a big round of applause. Well done, everybody. As we work together to end our reliance on coal power, we can reduce carbon emissions, improve public health, and create jobs, all at the same time. And in many parts of the world, including Australia, it is now cheaper to build a new wind or solar farm than it is to build a new coal-fired power plant. We can help workers pursue these opportunities and create a more vibrant and more sustainable economy. And now, let's take a look at how we're going to do it.
Renewable energy is cost competitive to coal, so there's really no longer any reason to be using coal.
We want to cement that trajectory towards a renewable future and making sure that the rate of coal plant closures increases between now and 2030. Tourism is a huge industry in Washington. With Centralia, the initial focus was on visibility and SO2, because one of the main attractions to people going to Mount Rainier is they want to be able to see the mountain.
We had to figure out a way to shut down a plant that's key to the power grid between Seattle and Portland. The community's interest, starts with Bob Gunther going, wait a minute, that's my job.
All the tax base that has built our infrastructure in the last 40 years because of this plant, it's been very significant.
We said to the company, we will let you sell your coal product as long as you agree to a near-term shutdown.
2020, there'll be some workers affected, and in 2025, other workers are affected.
It was so important to be able to have a glide path for the community to get ready for the eventual shutdown of the power plant.
TransAlta agreed to provide $55 million in transition funds in 3 categories: energy efficiency, community and economic development, and clean energy technologies.
it really can be a win-win to reduce these large air pollution sources. We're economically developing, we're reducing the air pollution, and we're getting healthier.
For communities anywhere in the world facing a coal plant closure, it's worth the effort to invest in the communication and the dialogue.
Because it sort of comes down to environment, labor, business opportunity combined, help the business get to clean, help the community stay whole, and you can get it done.
And now, the president of AFL-CIO, Richard Trumka.
Good morning. I want to thank you to Governor Brown for inviting me to say a few words on behalf of the 12.5 million working men and women who belong to the 55 unions of the AFL-CIO. I'm a coal miner by trade, actually a third-generation coal miner by trade. Now that might seem unusual at a summit like this, but I learned something about science in the mine. When the boss told us to ignore the deadly hazards of the job, that sagging timber overhead, that black lung cough, science told us the truth. And today, again, science tells us the truth, that climate change threatens our workers, our jobs, and our economy. And that's why the labor movement supports bold, comprehensive action to fight climate change. And that's why we support continued progress on vehicle tailpipe standards, and why we passed a strong climate resolution at our last convention. And that's why we continue to support the Paris Agreement. So make no mistake, this is a tough issue for us. But in the labor movement, we're used to tough issues and hard choices. We're prepared to do the right thing for our people and our planet, and we know that this fight can and must be about investing in a better, more inclusive, more just future, and about creating good jobs and good lives for working families. So I ask each one of you, does your plan for fighting climate change ask more from a sick, retired coal miner than it does from you or your family? If it does, then you need to think again. See, climate strategies that leave coal miners' pension funds bankrupt and power plant workers unemployed and construction workers making less than they do now, plans that devastate communities today while offering vague community promises about the future, they're more than unjust. They fundamentally undermine the power of the political coalition needed to address the climate crisis. Our enemies use these plans to divide us. They point to them to feed a politics of division and fear that threatens our entire democracy. And I understand that many are frustrated with the pace of action on climate change. but simply demanding that plants, industries, and projects be stopped or shut down with no plan for the people who are put out of work, no call for shared sacrifice, and no dialogue or solidarity with those whose lives and communities are dependent on carbon-based fuel, that poisons the political well and slows meaningful action on climate change. See, it's not good enough to simply call for an end to carbon emissions. We have a responsibility to think thoughtfully and strategically about how to actually make that change. And as a labor movement, we're ready to move faster. So what does that require? Well, it requires people like you and people like me sitting down to figure out how we fund and invest in technology and workers and communities that can build a sustainable economy of broadly shared prosperity. California is showing us the way. Under Governor Brown's leadership, unions and employers and government have come together to fight climate change and create good jobs by attaching labor standards to climate policies. And in the San Joaquin Valley alone, right here in California, oil country, there have been over 4,000 megawatts worth of new clean energy projects in the last 2 decades. 15 million job hours of union work at union wages with union benefits made possible. And new paid sick leave and workers' compensation laws combined with strong collective bargaining agreements help keep our members healthy and safe in the entire process. See, that's what it looks like when we partner to fight against climate change and for good jobs. This is a remarkable time for collective action. Teachers from West Virginia to Arizona, workers in transportation, journalism, energy, and more are really coming together for a voice on the job. The popularity of unions recently hit a 15-year high, and we're just getting started. You see, we can bring that energy and that momentum to the fight against climate change. I say, let's join together. Let's get the job done, and let's do it the right way. Thank you very much.
The Napa Sonoma fire. Not only did it impact people's lives, it impacted the entire environment around us. It demonstrated what can happen very quickly to an entire community. And that is an experience that we just don't want to see going on around the country and around the world.
Climate change is here, it's happening, it's real. All we have to do is look around at the weather phenomena. We're constantly setting records across the globe. Hottest days, hottest years, hottest average temperatures. It's impacting all of us.
It's hard to imagine a dimension of human health that climate change doesn't touch. It deepens poverty. It threatens our food and water supply. It tears people from their homes. It makes large parts of the world uninhabitable. If you care about climate change, you have to care about health. And if you care about health, you have to care about climate change.
As a pediatrician, my job is not only to take care of the children that I'm seeing in my practice, but also to advocate for a healthy environment for the children I'm taking care of. The health effects of climate change disproportionately affect children, people of color, people living in poverty, the elderly, people living with chronic disease. And as climate change worsens, the health outcomes caused by climate change in these populations will worsen as well.
There's been a coalition of hospital systems all around the world working to address the environmental footprint, especially the climate footprint of healthcare, so that the mission of healthcare is actually expanding to go beyond treating individual patients to supporting healthier communities and healthier planet.
I think this is where we have the real opportunity of creating public-private partnerships. And it's that synergy that I think will help us to really get at this problem and work on it together towards resolutions.
I truly believe that if our policymakers and the public were able to understand better that climate change is an urgent human health issue, we'd be able to get to where we need to be to act on climate as a society.
We need to take steps because this is impacting all of our health.
Not everybody cares about energy. Not everybody cares about climate change, but everybody cares about health. It's personal.
Climate change is fundamentally a global health issue.
It's about health.
It's all about health.
It's about health, and we have the power to change the dynamic to advocate for health on behalf of all people.
Please welcome Chairman and CEO, Kaiser Permanente, Bernard J. Tyson.
Hello. It's an honor and a privilege to be here and spend a few minutes with you. I'd like to start by saying, on behalf of Kaiser Permanente, what a privilege it is to be a part of working with many others to solve something in this world. I also want to say to our guests who are not from the Bay Area, whether you are from outside of California or outside of the United States, while you're in San Francisco, hopefully you will not need it, but should something happen, you're welcome at Kaiser Permanente. So we're very clear as an organization that there's an intersection between the environment and total health. Kaiser Permanente is very much focused on what we call total health, the mind, the body, and the spirit. We also know that there are circumstances that affects a person's health. How you eat, how you sleep, how you manage stress. Those are some examples. We also are aware how the environment directly affects a person's health. And that is the intersection in which Kaiser Permanente is involved. We believe that we can make a difference in the climate. We believe that we can help others to deal with the effects of the climate changes that are going on. We know from our work, we know from the studies, we know from the heat maps, that when these natural disasters happen, it affects the health of individuals. It affects the mental health. It affects the breathing. It affects the lungs. It affects parts of the body. So we're committed to being a part of the solution. Earlier this week, we announced that we now have put additional agreements in place to achieve our commitment of being carbon neutral by the end of 2020. It was recommended that I wait until today to make that announcement, but I was too excited, so we did that on Monday. So now I had to repeat it to you. Each and every one of us could make a difference. Kaiser Permanente is demonstrating that. We have over 75 million square feet of space around the United States in which we provide care and coverage and total health. So it is possible, and we're on our way with our wind farms and with our solar and with our battery systems. We believe that we can achieve this we are already about 30% towards that carbon neutrality goal. So we're committed, and we're privileged to be here and to be a part of this. And when I first started to really get engaged with this and had the opportunity to go to Paris and be a part of that, in one of the panels, I made a statement. I said, I'm very new at this, and I am very new at this. And later on, I'll be more sophisticated about it. And I'm a little more sophisticated given the wonderful team of experts that work at Kaiser Permanente that's educating us every single day. But I ended by saying, but just the idea of doing something to make the earth better is just a really good place to be. So I'm down with Mother Earth. Thank you very much.
At Salesforce, we believe that business is a platform for change. That's why we've built a clean, carbon-neutral cloud, operate as a net zero company, and will reach 100% renewable energy by 2022. So when it came time to build a new headquarters, we went big, really big. But in terms of its footprint, the Salesforce Tower is tiny. It's on track to be double LEED Platinum certified and sources 100% renewable energy. It outperforms city energy guidelines by more than 20%. Will feature the largest blackwater system of its kind in North America, saving 30,000 gallons of water a day. And the Salesforce Ohana working inside it, they're spending thousands of hours volunteering in the environment each year. Because the business of business is to make the world a better place.
And now, Chairman and CEO of Salesforce, Mark Benioff.
Wow, it's great to be here. Welcome to San Francisco, everybody. Good morning. Is everybody having a good time here? Amazing day. Well, good morning, everybody, and to Governor Brown, Vice President Gore, to all of our co-chairs, the UN Foundation delegates, friends from around the world. As a native San Franciscan, I'm thrilled to join Mayor Breed and the people of our city in welcoming you here to our incredible hometown. I hope you're having a good time. All of us in San Francisco, all of us at Salesforce, my wife, Lynn, and I, we're deeply honored to be your partner in this historic gathering. And we're here today because climate change threatens to impact every continent, every country, every community, and every human being. We're here because the worst effects of climate change will be endured by the poorest and most vulnerable among us. And this is a matter of equality and justice. And we're here because even with the historic commitments that were made in Paris, the amazing commitments that were made in Paris, even with the new commitments at this summit, and it's a great summit, it is not enough. We are still not on track to meet these targets. And soon the impacts of climate can be irreversible. This is a make or break moment. That is why we are here, and that is why we all have to do much, much more. It's up to our generation to act and to act now. The threat is so big and so multidimensional, it cannot be solved by anyone, any person, any government, any scientific community, any business, any citizen alone. All of us must work together. We have to create this and do this in a multi-stakeholder way. We have to continue multi-stakeholder dialogues just like this. We have to turn it into multi-stakeholder action. And we need to all come together in one grand coalition. This is critical for our future. With the tremendous resources at our disposal, I truly believe that the businesses, companies like mine, can be one of the greatest platforms for change, including in this incredible fight against climate change. Now, as the CEO of a tech company, I'm very excited, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm excited because we have an extraordinary opportunity to harness the amazing technologies of this fourth industrial revolution that now surrounds us. Big data, artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles, incredible advancements in the biosciences like CRISPR and others, and use them for good in the fight for a healthier planet. And here today, I want to challenge people like me, CEOs, people like Bernard, who we just heard from, in the United States and around the world, to recognize the business of business is not simply making money. The business of business is improving the state of the world. The business of business is to make the world a better place. And I challenge CEOs to see that taking action on climate change is a competitive advantage, because today's customers, our investors, our employees, all of our stakeholders, and especially our millennial employees, they want to be associated with companies that take the lead on sustainability. And the spirit of innovation that has transformed our world and is transforming our world with this fourth industrial revolution, it must also be harnessed now to save our planet. These technologies have been given to us as a gift, and now we need to harness these technologies to accomplish our goals. But each and every one of us has to step up much, much further. And every CEO has to step up. And many, many times there's an opportunity right in our own backyard. Living here in California, living here in San Francisco, I can tell you I'm so passionate about our environment, but also I'm on our ocean. I can see the incredible changes that are happening in our oceans. The health of our oceans and the health of our societies, as all of us know, are deeply linked. But today, our oceans and societies are threatened by overfishing, pollution, climate change, acidification, coral bleaching. Yet just look at what's possible when we bring all of our stakeholders together. You look at the World Economic Forum in Geneva, Switzerland, the Friends of Ocean Action, a network of scientists, entrepreneurs, researchers, businesses, advocates who have come together and helped the G7 prioritize oceans for the very first time in this year's June summit. Or the Ocean Research Center at the University of California right here in Santa Barbara, bringing together the brightest minds in the basic science to find incredible new solutions to these problems. Or look at what just happened here in San Francisco this weekend. Look at Boyan Slat's ocean cleanup all the way from Amsterdam, which last week launched its first system from right here in San Francisco to clean up all that plastic in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. This is what's exciting. Incredible people, incredible technology, entrepreneurs taking risks, going to the next level, looking for new ideas, new concepts, new notions, new innovations. It's all around us. Look at the new research expedition in Northwest Hawaii that we are in partnership with my good friend, you're going to hear from Brian Chatz, our senator, which is going to help us better understand and protect our oceans. Or look at what just happened in the last 2 days at Salesforce, where we did the ocean hack, where we brought in incredible technologists and entrepreneurs and venture capitalists and businesses and governments for looking for new ways to heal the ocean. This is the progress that's possible when we bring all of our stakeholders together, and especially CEOs. Just as every CEO has to step up, every organization and company has to step up as well. Now, you all know, and I know, we need to see a broad decarbonization of our economy, sector by sector. This is critical for our future. I'm excited to announce today that Salesforce is partnering with Mission 2020 to create an alliance of 21 major technology companies just like us that are going to decarbonize and that will harness the power of the fourth industrial revolution to reduce emissions across all of our economic sectors. We're calling it the Step Up Declaration. The Step Up Declaration because we're stepping up with the tangible commitments to reach a climate turning point by 2020. And we want all of you, we want every company to join us. Now let me be specific. Salesforce Tower is not far from here. You probably all saw it on the way in from the airport. It's already powered by 100% renewable energy. It's already one of the most sustainable buildings in the world. It's supposed to be an example of what is possible in the future using all these new technologies. In fact, All of our offices established after 2020 will meet the highest LEED standards for efficiency. And we need every company to fully embrace all of these green building practices. Salesforce operates today as a net zero company. Today, we operate with net zero greenhouse gas emissions, delivering a clean, carbon neutral cloud for all of our customers worldwide. And we need every company in our industry in cloud computing to commit now to having net zero clouds. Just as we have committed to being 100% renewable by 2022, we need every company to go with us to be 100% renewable. And we can do it. It's all right in front of us. It's easy and straightforward, and all we have to do is decide. Now is the time. Today, Salesforce is also announcing that we'll establish new science-based targets to reduce our emissions even further. And we'll encourage our suppliers and our partners to do the same, because every business has the opportunity to not only do this themselves, but to motivate across their entire supply chain. Every company can motivate across their entire ecosystem. We all have that leverage. You've seen us use that leverage when we went to Indiana, and we can use our economic might to change the laws where there was discrimination against the LGBTQ community. We can use that same power to change those laws in favor of this new incredible world that we are all seeking. Now, finally, every employee has to step up. At Salesforce, we've always embraced our 1-1-1 model, donating 1% of our equity, 1% of our time, 1% of our product to nonprofits and communities. Many of the NGOs and nonprofits who are here, including some of the great ones that we all know, like the Sierra Club, amazing, or Greenpeace, use Salesforce to run their operations. And that is so meaningful to us, because for over 20 years, we've given hundreds of millions of dollars to nonprofits and NGOs as part of our charter. We've provided our technology for free now to over 30,000 nonprofits and NGOs. And because every Salesforce employee gets seven paid days off a year to volunteer, our employees also have given more than 3 million hours to worthy causes, including and dominantly by EarthForce. Thousands of our employees give their time and their energy and their technology capabilities to fight climate change every single day. Now, I share this because every company can join our Pledge 1% movement and unleash the power within them to help create this climate change problem. How are we going to do that? We're going to get all of our employees focused on healing our planet. Every company can give their employees paid time off to volunteer, and every company can have an EarthForce, and every company can have employees to give their time to help the environment. This is how businesses can truly step up. That's how we can rise to this moment. This is how we can spark this change of transformation. This is how we can decarbonize the entire global economy. And that's how, as part of a grand coalition, we can not only take action ourselves, we can inspire all nations to act as well. So on behalf of everyone at Salesforce, we're excited to be your partner. We're excited and inspired by the difference we can make together to build a world that's cleaner and healthier for generations to come. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to San Francisco. Thank you, Governor Brown, for this amazing summit, and let's have an amazing event. Thank you very much.
Well, we've heard from remarkable innovators in business and industry. These are people who are pushing the limits in every field, from healthcare to the workplace to the marketplace. And by the way, downstairs you'll find even more examples of this kind of exciting, innovative progress in the Climate Innovation Showcase. Again, that's downstairs. But the private sector doesn't have a monopoly on innovation. All around the world, we are seeing governments step up to provide solutions and to push forward bold ideas on climate. Let's hear now from some of those leaders.
And now, please join me in welcoming the Prime Minister of Fiji, Frank Bainimarama.
Bulavinaka, and good morning to you all. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to speak today to the national and regional leaders in the room and around the world. We all know that the levels of ambition in our national plans need to be ramped up because we are not on track to meet the targets of the Paris Agreement. That's why this year of Talanoa is so important. The Talanoas are being held around the world, are producing thousands of good ideas and a torrent of valuable information that can put us back on track. Yesterday, we had a very productive Talanoa here in San Francisco with the representatives of regional government, business and civil society, truly a microcosm of the grand coalition we are harnessing on the global level. As you've probably heard, Talanoa is a Pacific way of sharing stories, but it's not just talk. Talanoa is storytelling for a purpose, and the stories we've heard in yesterday's Talanoa and the scores of others that have taken place around the world aren't just talk. They are tools, tools that can be used by political leaders to increase climate action at the national level. The stories of what is happening in cities, in boardrooms, in places of worship and schools, and in local communities provide political leaders with the arsenal we need to increase ambition. These stories speak of the urgency for action, but also show us the wealth of possibility offered by new innovations and solutions. One of the simple and ironic truths about climate change is that the more we want everything to stay the same, the more we are going to have to change. Loss of land, degradation of our oceans, certain effects of warming, extreme weather and other certain effects of warming will rob us of community, culture, and livelihood. So there's no hiding from the consequences. But there are ways to help shape our own destiny. We need to help people embrace the hope. So my fellow leaders, I can only say this. We were elected to lead, not to pander, not to follow, and certainly not to hold up a wet finger to the wind. So let's lead. Let's marshal our forces and move to the front, because as we say in the military, you cannot lead from the rear. Ask yourself, if I could solve this climate crisis, knowing that it would come at the cost of my political career, would I do it? As far as I'm concerned, there is only one answer. Thank you.
Now coming to the stage, Minister for the Environment, the Netherlands, Stintje van Veldhoven, and President and CEO, Port of Rotterdam Authority, Allard Kastelein.
Good morning. It's really wonderful to be here. And I'm happy to share the stage with the Port of Rotterdam Authority. Our new action program reflects the ambition of the Netherlands. We brought Paris home, into the heart of our national policy, but also into the hearts of businesses, cities, and other non-state partners. Together, we have the ambition to reduce by 50% our greenhouse gases in 2030. And this is a huge challenge. And that means that we are transitioning in our entire economy. We are innovating our industry. We are reforming our energy supply, closing down our coal-fired power plants before 2030. We are building the world's biggest offshore wind farm, and all new cars will be zero emission from 2030. And when we talk about all this, there's still one point missing. This world is going to 10 billion people, and those 10 billion people will be using a lot of resources. So when we want to tackle climate change, we need to look beyond the energy question and address resources. And that is why the Netherlands is committing to halving our resources use by 2030. We want to be a completely circular economy by 2050, a no-waste economy. Thank you so much. A no-waste economy that reuses raw materials, making new concrete from old concrete, new plastics from old plastics. This is an action summit because we need to deliver, and the Netherlands is very much committed to do so. 1 year ago, we committed on ports, and that is why I'm very happy to be here today with Allard Kastelein, who's going to tell you what the Port of Rotterdam is committed to do. Thank you so much.
Minister, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. The port industrial area in Rotterdam actually is accountable for some 20% of the total Dutch emissions. Hence, the Port of Rotterdam is keenly supporting our government's activities by investing in energy efficiency, carbon capture, and circular economy initiatives. Ports are an essential infrastructure in order to efficiently move products, raw materials, goods around the world to and from countries. Together, the shipping industry and ports are accountable for a significant amount of greenhouse gases. You could compare total emissions to the emission profile of a country like Germany. So the Port of Rotterdam has decided to take action. And I'm very pleased today to announce the launch of the Global Port Climate Action Program, where we have reached out to other leading ports around the world to collaborate, to create a coalition of the willing to address climate change issues and to decarbonize the maritime sector. And I'm pleased to confirm that the ports of Los Angeles, LA, Vancouver, Hamburg, Antwerp, Barcelona have joined so far. We will focus our efforts on increasing the efficiency of the supply chain by using data technology. We will increase the uptake of renewable shore-to-power and shore-to-ship facilities. We will enable further development of decarbonized maritime fuels. We will want to decarbonize all import cargo handling facilities. And we wish to collaborate with the legislator and regulator in order to come up with global or regional appropriate aspirational policies and regulations and legislation. We are reaching out to other ports to join our efforts. We believe that by addressing and calling upon the shipping industry and ports to join us, we can truly make a difference and can make it happen. Thank you very much.
Please welcome the European Commissioner for Climate Action and Energy, Minister Miguel Arias Cañete.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, this summit is about taking ambition to the next level. How can we do this? I would like to outline 3 building blocks. The first is commitment, maintaining and stepping up our efforts. The European Union is deeply committed to the Paris Agreement, to the transition to a low-carbon, climate-resilient future, and we are delivering. We have completed our framework of laws and support mechanisms to meet our Paris pledge, to cut emissions domestically by at least 40% by 2030 and bring clean energy to our citizens. And putting a price on carbon is working. The European Union already has a good track record in decoupling emissions from economic growth for the past decades. We are also deeply committed to helping others make the transition, especially the most vulnerable. The European Union will continue to show leadership and to step up international cooperation and support to partners worldwide. That brings me to my second point, cooperation. We have to meet the global challenge together. So I am very pleased to announce today that Governor Brown and I have agreed to enhance our cooperation on carbon markets to contribute to putting the Paris goals into action. I am convinced that the experience and leadership of both California and the European Union can help boost opportunities and ambition in these key areas. We are going to step up exchange on our cap and trade programs to bring our market closer and ensure real progress on emissions. Last year, we committed to hold regular dialogue on the design and implementation of our carbon markets. We have now agreed to enhance this collaboration on key carbon pricing topics, including on investments, technologies, competitiveness, or auctioning revenues. We will also work with others at national and subnational levels to develop, implement, and strengthen cap and trade systems. Since last year, a major player, China, has joined the carbon market community. It's a powerful signal that an economy of the size of China chooses to establish a carbon pricing mechanism. Let's pursue that momentum through various channels, be it bilaterally or through regional and multilateral initiatives. The third ingredient for taking ambition to the next level is a clear vision of the future for long-term decarbonization of our economies. The European Union wants to take the lead on this, so right now we are developing a long-term strategy for reducing Europe emissions. We have promised to present a first proposal on this strategy before this year's United Nations Climate Summit in Poland. It will be a strategy of economic and sectorial transformation to bring our carbon footprint to zero by 2050, to make our economy more competitive, more resilient, and more modern, to show a concrete example on how the goals of the Paris Agreement can be achieved together with social and economic development. We hope our action can help and inspire others to make their own long-term plans for doing their fair share towards the vital Paris objectives. This summit shows the power and potential of everyone working together. We can only meet the unprecedented climate challenge and reap the rewards of the clean energy transformation by moving forward together. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you, Linda Douglas, for your kind introduction. Thank you for your tremendous leadership as a representative of our country in the media and in the world. It's an honor to be here with so many of you this morning, to join in welcoming so many global leaders to our city of San Francisco and to our golden state of California. We are proud of our tradition of being a hotbed of bipartisan environmental fervor, a place where John Muir established the Sierra Club in 1892. And it was another Bay Area leader, David Brower, who established the League of Conservation Voters. For us, combating global warming is not an issue, it is an ethic, it is a value, and it is imperative that we act upon that value. For this reason, when I was Speaker, the priority of addressing global warming and energy independence was my flagship issue. Based on our values, informed by science, and inspired by the work of Vice President Al Gore, we created the Select Committee on Energy Independence and Global Warming, led by now Senator Ed Markey. Despite what is happening in Washington now, I am ever hopeful. Because then, working with Republicans, we passed the Energy Independence and Security Act signed by President Bush, charting a new path to clean energy, reducing emissions, increasing the use of renewables, and holding polluters accountable for environmental disasters, among other key priorities. Under President Obama, we went on to pass the Waxman-Markey American Clean Energy and Security Act in the House, but we were stopped in the Senate by the coal industry. For this and other reasons, I am so grateful to Michael Bloomberg's Beyond Coal initiative working with the Sierra Club. It is so essential. As Californians, we are exceptionally proud of our Governor, Jerry Brown, for his decades Thank you. For his decades of leadership as an early visionary, a brilliant strategist, and a persistent champion to preserve the planet for future generations. Decades ago, he recognized early that we must act swiftly, boldly, and collectively in the face of a grim future, one of rising oceans. He was early on the oceans issue. Savage wildfires and extreme and unpredictable weather patterns that devastate communities and destabilize our world. This conference, and thank you all for being here, this conference is a manifestation of Governor Brown's determination to confront one of the most urgent and serious crises the world has ever faced. Thank you, Governor Brown. To confront the climate challenge, we must think globally, organize locally, and act personally. And that means understanding how to engage everyone in the solution at every level of society, across all ethnic and community lines, including our indigenous people. For them, land is a gift from God and their ancestors who rest there, a sacred place with which they need to interact if they are to maintain their identity and values. And we must also engage our young people, because the future and this planet's future belongs to them. I'm so pleased that this is a top issue for millennials in the United States of America. Michael Bloomberg, our co-chair, it's an honor for me to bring forward Michael Bloomberg. He understands the public sector, the private sector, and the nonprofit sector, and how to harness the power of all three to drive progress. As UN Special Envoy for Climate Action, he has turbocharged the efforts of governments, businesses, and civil society to set ambitious targets and then to meet them. As mayor of New York, he advanced cutting-edge initiatives that slashed emissions and that set the gold standard for our nation. As a business leader, he appreciates the power of private capital to combat the global climate crisis. As a philanthropist, his generosity has been a magnet for other philanthropists to inform the public of what the climate crisis means to them in their lives. As an author and producer, he is building public support for action and bringing the crisis to the forefront of our national and global conversation. This is very important because when you say climate, sometimes people think that's something into the future or very esoteric, but the fact is it's about clean air, clean water that our children and grandchildren breathe and drink. In closing, I again want to thank and recognize the leadership of Governor Jerry Brown, who just this week, who set California on the path to carbon-free economy by 2045. We're so blessed with our co-chairs. Thank you, Jerry Brown. I also now want to acknowledge the extraordinary leadership across all sectors in our society. Michael Bloomberg. Thank you, Chairman Michael Bloomberg. And what's important, many things that the mayor has done, but one of the important things is to connect this issue to people and for them to see the connection of this value, this ethic, this imperative in their lives. So now we're going to give you a preview of Michael's new film called Paris to Pittsburgh. Let's watch the clip. Thank you all very much.
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord. I was elected to represent the citizens of Pittsburgh, not Paris.
Pittsburgh? Now, what was upsetting about that alliteration was a stereotype of our past. But Pittsburgh is poised and ready to lead in the 21st century.
We're seeing cities and states and companies and individuals saying we are still in, even with the president pulling us out of one of the most important treaties, when every other major country in the world has said we are going to come together and commit to dealing with climate change.
I continue to be shocked at how close the water is encroaching just on the beach. Sea level rise is completely apparent in Miami.
We had 6.5 foot of water on the main level of the house for over a week. Stuff that was in our bedroom wound up in the garage, and stuff that was in the garage, I imagine that's way down in Louisiana now.
The storms are becoming stronger in Puerto Rico. The worst thing is to think that that reality will repeat.
Not a lot survived that fire in Ventura County. It burned so hot that everything just liquefied. To not be able to save anything, it was just really hard.
If we're going to avoid breaching catastrophic levels of warming, we need to be putting our foot on the renewable energy acceleration pedal.
The transformation towards a renewable energy future is the greatest economic opportunity of the 21st century.
Businesses have lined up to say we're still committing to the Paris Accord because it's good for their bottom line.
My daughter Faye, she made the decision that wind was where she wanted to be. This is an opportunity that hasn't been available in America for a long, long time.
The solar industry is offering that second chance opportunity to individuals like myself. It doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, you have a role to play here.
And if we look at it as an American Marshall Plan, we can exceed the goals of the Paris Agreement.
This is the start of us taking control of our future.
We have the right to a future. We have the right to these basic necessities that we need to live. We, the people, need to take action. Our lives are at stake here.
Please welcome the United Nations Secretary General's Special Envoy for Climate Action, the founder of Bloomberg Philanthropies, and the 108th Mayor of New York City, Michael Bloomberg.
Thank you. Thank you, and good afternoon, good morning, whatever it is, depending on where you come from. Hello. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming. Okay. Nancy in particular for her leadership and her good work on this issue over the years. And I hope you all enjoyed the trailer for our film, Paris to Pittsburgh. It will air on the National Geographic Channel in December, so mark your calendars. And I think it'll be just as popular as From the Ashes, the movie we made about coal. I also wanted to thank Governor Brown for bringing us together today in a city and state that have been leaders on climate change for a very long time. And Governor Brown and Congresswoman Pelosi both deserve an awful lot of credit for that. Yes, you can applaud. Now, California is a great example of how fighting climate change and growing the economy grow hand in hand, and that's something we also saw in New York City. We created a record number of jobs while at the same time reducing our carbon footprint by 19%. And I know many of you have had similar experiences in your own cities and countries, and we appreciate the distance many of you traveled to be here today. Governor Brown and I began talking about this summit last year, after the Trump administration announced its intention to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement. Obviously, neither of us were happy about that, to say the least. Climate change is a global challenge, and Washington ought to be leading from the front. We also knew many people around the world would conclude wrongly that America was walking away from climate action. Nothing could be further from the truth. And that's the message of this film, and it's why we are here today. We want the world to know that Americans are more determined than ever to make progress on climate, and we are making progress right now, a lot of progress. In fact, we are making just as much progress under this administration as we did under the last. It's not for sale, but that's okay. Give them a second, let them have their say. You wouldn't know that from reading the headlines that we aren't making progress, that we are making progress, because the headline focuses on the political fights in Washington. But the real action is happening in cities, states, and the private sector. And the good news is those groups are positioning the United States to uphold our end of the Paris Agreement, no matter what happens in Washington. The fact is, in the United States, the decisions that have been the most influential over greenhouse gas emissions are not made by the federal government. These decisions are made by mayors and governors and corporate executives and individuals for their own homes who want to deliver cheaper energy, more jobs, clean air, and lead healthier lives. They are made by CEOs who want to save money on energy costs and capitalize on new business opportunities generated by advanced technology. And they are made by citizens who want to breathe the fresh air and drink clean water that otherwise would make them sick. Because of all of these groups, over the last decade, the U.S. has cut its carbon emissions more than any other large nation in the world. Last year, with no help from Washington whatsoever, U.S. emissions fell to their lowest levels in 25 years. Yes, you're going to applaud? You can applaud because you were part of the reason that happened. You made it happen. The story of how and why that reduction is happening is being written in communities across America, and it's a story that just doesn't get told enough. Let me give you one example. Over the last 6 years, more than half of all U.S. coal-fired power plants have been closed or made plans to do so. That's 273 coal-fired power plants out of 530. And I'm happy to say, since the 2016 election, coal-fired power plant closures have continued at the same rate, despite the administration's effort to prop up the industry with subsidies. And the reason is, again, simple. Washington isn't in charge of America's energy production. Consumers are, and the new technology is delivering exactly what they want: energy that is cheaper and cleaner than coal. Washington can't stop. Yes, you can applaud. Washington can't stop the decline of coal, and it can't keep America from fulfilling the commitment we made in Paris. Over the past year, yes, you can applaud again if you want. I'm always happy to get applause. Over the past year, thousands of U.S. cities, states, and businesses, universities, and others have reaffirmed their support for the Paris Agreement. And together, their work is being supported by an initiative created by Governor Brown and Bloomberg Philanthropies called America's Pledge. America's pledge aggregates all the climate actions being taken by all the groups that have declared their support for the Paris Agreement. To put the size of that group in perspective, it represents more than half of the U.S. population. If it were a country, it would have the world's third largest economy, behind only China and the overall United States. In other words, if Washington drops out of the Paris Agreement, the group of Americans committed to it would represent more economic might than any other country still in the agreement other than China. Now, the Paris Agreement wasn't only about commitments, it was also about accountability. And through America's pledge, we're upholding that end of the deal as well. By measuring the progress that the U.S. is making cutting emissions and reporting that to the United Nations, just like every other nation is doing under the Paris Agreement. We submitted our first report at the UN's last climate conference in Germany. This morning, we released our latest report and announced some very encouraging news from it. The report, which is based on rigorous data collected and analyzed, shows that the United States is nearly halfway to our Paris goal of cutting emissions by at least 26% by the year 2025. And it outlines the steps that public, private, and nonprofit organizations can take to help our country reach that mark. Every day, we're getting closer. Just let me give you a few examples. Indianapolis has cut emissions by around 17% through actions like changing thousands of streetlights to LEDs. Georgetown, Texas is running on nearly 100% clean energy, and dozens of more cities are on the way. Bloomberg is one of the many American companies committed to reaching that same goal, and we're on track to get there by 2025. And in the meantime, we're improving our energy efficiency by about 50%. A coalition of Western states with Republican and Democratic governors are working together to build electric vehicle charging stations. And progress like this, small steps, but steps that add up to big things, are playing out around the country. Now, that doesn't mean what happens in Washington isn't important. It is. We need more federal leadership, and that's one reason why I've gotten so involved in this year's midterm elections. Thank you. Now, I've never been a partisan guy. I've been a Democrat, a Republican, and an independent. So I know something about partisan politics. But Republicans in Washington have had years to take on the issue, and they have stuck their heads in the sand. We need a new direction in Washington, so I'm supporting Democrats in their bid to take over the House of Representatives. Now, that won't on its own break the deadlock, but it will send a message that members of Congress better start taking this issue seriously, or the American public will send them packing. Until we get leadership in Washington, the report we're releasing this morning can serve as a blueprint for national climate action driven by the bottom up. It's also a blueprint that other countries can use to make their own bottom-up progress, and that's exactly what's starting to happen. The Japanese Climate Initiative is a coalition of businesses, cities, and regional governments working to accelerate progress there. Another new coalition of non-state groups was launched in Mexico just last month, and we're hopeful that groups in more countries will embrace this approach in the months and years ahead. Remember, the goals nations set at Paris were just the beginning. They have to keep aiming higher, and they increasingly recognize how important cities, states, and businesses are in that work. Through our foundation, we'll help them harness the power of these groups and drive progress. Now, we have a lot of work to do, of course. Every week seems to bring fresh evidence of the emergency of climate change, from rising sea levels to record-setting storms and wildfires. So this year, Bloomberg Philanthropies challenged the 100 biggest U.S. cities to create ambitious proposals to cut emissions from the two biggest sources, transportation and buildings. And over the course of this fall, we'll announce the winners starting tomorrow. We're also helping states create plans to get more energy from clean sources, and we will keep working with the Beyond Coal campaign to reduce our reliance on coal-fired power plants. Now, we could do a lot more, a lot faster with support from the federal government. Instead, the administration is inflicting real harm on America. According to the EPA's own estimate, the new coal pollution rules it just proposed would lead to at least 1,400 more premature deaths each year. I doubt those rules will ever go into effect because cities and states are fighting back, just as they have against all of Washington's attempts to reverse our progress. And California, I'm happy to say, is leading a group of states that are resisting federal rollbacks of fuel efficiency standards for vehicle rollbacks that neither automakers nor consumers want. Other states are sending their own rules to reduce methane leaks from oil and gas operations. And cities all around the country are cutting carbon emissions through energy efficiency, which brings savings to residents. We're going to keep fighting, and we're going to keep winning. To the non-Americans in this room, I would say thank you for not giving up on us. We're going to get there. I'm convinced of that. And we're going to do it no matter what obstacles Washington tries to throw in our way. So everyone here, keep up all the great work you've been doing. And I look forward to seeing new efforts and partnerships come out of this forum that will keep us on the path to victory in the fight against climate change. All the best. We're going to win. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, today we've heard about climate impacts, but we've also heard about the hard-fought progress that's being made. With the leadership of everybody here in this room, we can continue to work to create an era where clean energy is the new normal, an era where millions of people who live and work around the world will do so in a pollution-free economy. All of us will benefit collectively by making climate action a priority, because when we pursue a clean energy economy, we can also provide people with pathways out of poverty and access to a better quality of life. And one of the leaders who has helped us in the world here to understand the connection between poverty and climate change is Van Jones. Let's take a look at some of his work.
The one thing that we all need to be focused on is building a green economy that is strong enough to lift millions of people out of poverty.
One of the biggest problems is around the high cost of living and the low quality of life. Green up.
All across the country, power plants are poisoning our communities, and they think it's okay. It's not okay.
Poverty and pollution. These issues traditionally have been seen as so big, they have to be tackled separately. What we now understand is that these issues are so interconnected that they can't actually be solved unless they are tackled together.
It is hard to learn if you can't breathe.
We're seeing the struggle on families' faces to pay for medical bills for pollution-related disease.
There's a better technology out there that's not powered by pollution. It's powered by solutions.
We really need to make sure that the solutions are aggressive and accelerating us to a clean energy future.
We have a responsibility to spread the good news about sustainability.
This power plant switched away from coal to benefit the air of the community that we're standing in right now.
We have seen that solar makes a huge difference.
Things like affordable housing by transit-oriented development, man pools for migrant farm workers,
Green economy jobs,
home weatherization,
electric vehicles.
Put our kids on buses going forward to a clean energy future. Let's create some jobs for people who are creating these new smart batteries and stuff.
We're actually investing in a new economy for communities that have been underinvested in for so long.
Communities of color are actually hit hardest, first and worst often when it comes to pollution.
I've been having more asthma attacks because high pollution.
Climate change is having impacts in different ways.
It gets very high, so I had to keep my AC running, and that's when my bill got extremely high.
We just continue living and keep struggling.
Join Green for All, where we're addressing poverty and pollution at the same time.
Let's build a more sustainable future with good jobs, better health, and a good environment. We're
Hello. I am honored to be here. We are going to have an extraordinary panel, but please give a round of applause to the young people who make Green for All work. All for Green, Green for All. Let's hear it for Green for All. I love the young folks we work with every day. Our challenge is to fight pollution and poverty at the same time. We think that you can create more work, more wealth, and better health with a green economy than you ever will with a gray, pollution-based economy. And we're going to hear from some of the best people in the world about how to get that done. So I'm going to walk to my chair, and as I do, I want you to give a round of applause to Mayor Sylvester Turner from Houston, Catherine McKenna, who's the Minister of Environment and Climate Change from Canada, Anand Mahindra with the Mahindra Group, and Alexandra Paltz from L'Oreal. Bring them all out. Let's go. Hey. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Y'all can keep clapping. These are pretty amazing folks. Elected officials from two countries and business leaders from 2 countries. First, I just want to say we don't have a lot of hope often in the world right now with all the challenges. And you, all of you, in your respective roles, are some of the most hope-generating leaders that we have. And you're kind of crazy in that you are willing to not only take on the climate crisis, but you're willing to do it in ways that make sense from a governance point of view, from a business point of view. And we just want to hear from you how you're doing it. So I want to start with you. We have Anand Mahindra here. Now, your group is a $20.7 billion group. That's a lot of money, even in this room, okay? So help me understand why you've decided to be so charitable. I'm sure you're losing a lot of money in this clean energy economy. Can you talk to us a little bit about all the money that you're losing and why you're willing to lose it?
I hope my analysts didn't hear you. We're actually making money, which is the point I'm going to make. But how did this start, Van? You know, it all does start with the heart. I'm a newly minted grandfather, so I do care about my grandson's future. And this might come as shocking news to some, but business people are human beings too. We have the same emotions. But the interesting thing I found was that as we moved from the heart, and then of course governments get in the picture and nudge you to do things, then you have your brand enhancement, which is a goal. But we found serendipitously that everything we tried to do to help the planet made money for us. We started, let's say, simply LED lighting, a 1-year payback. We said we should be in solar power because my corporate communications team said, take a stand on something. And then some maverick engineer in our company goes and creates a solar business, and today we are the largest solar developers in India. And making money, by the way, Van. So it's not about giving away money. My message in the last few years has been very simply this. This is not only about saving the planet, this is the biggest business opportunity of the next decades. So if anyone wants to move away from climate change, leave the arena to us and to see business and the good of the planet converge, we're very happy. We get more mileage for ourselves. And how do we get this traction? How do we continue to make our businesses look for innovation here? That's where the science-based targets came up, and Christiana spoke about that in the morning. So in Davos in January, I issued a call globally to increase the number of companies that were going to commit to science-based targets. Science-based targets basically are if you set targets which will allow you to align with the Paris Agreement target of limiting warming to 2 degrees centigrade. And if you do that, you will be making progress together. So I issued that call, and I'm happy to say that since that time, since January, there's been a 39% increase. Christiana put up a figure of 476 companies that have already signed up. It's 488 as we speak right now. So I'm delighted, and I want to congratulate all the companies in the world. Combined $10 trillion of market cap in these 488 companies committing.
Amazing. I love the fact that you tried to do it for charitable reasons and couldn't help making money. You actually wound up making money despite yourself. Let's go from corporates to governance and to the government sector. You're in Canada.
I am.
Well, technically you're in San Francisco.
Not right now.
but you're in Canada. You're rolling out a pretty aggressive plan that I think ordinary people can understand. Can you talk a little bit about what you're trying to get done in Canada?
So there's a number of things. If you're going to tackle climate change, you have to take action across the board, across sectors. One of the things we're doing, it sounds really wonky, is putting a price on pollution. And the reason you need to do this is because polluting is not free. I was just in the high Arctic in Canada a few days ago with Inuit, our indigenous peoples there, and they're seeing huge impacts of climate change, including on their country food. So this is a food that they rely on is disappearing. We have huge forest fires across the west of Canada. We had extreme heat where people are dying. And as I like to put it, I mean, by not taking action on pollution, by not putting a cost on it, you're passing on the biggest debt ever to future generations. And I've got 3 kids, and we can't do that. And so putting a price on pollution is something that's really important, recognizing that there's a cost. And when I'm a politician, right? I have to knock on doors, and I have to convince people that what we're doing makes sense. And there are other politicians that want to knock on doors and say what we're doing doesn't recognize that people need jobs. You can do both. And so having a cost on pollution is important because what it does is businesses innovate. Polluters pay, of course, but businesses will innovate, they'll find clean solutions, and they'll do exactly what Anand said, that they will take advantage of the $23 trillion opportunity of clean growth, and also we will do what we have to do, which we need to be serious about climate action, and we need to leave a more sustainable planet to our kids.
Well, look, I wish more politicians talk like you. That's a strong case. But this is getting weird because you're talking about making money, you're talking about innovation, and at L'Oreal, you have also found a different way to talk about this entire issue. Talk to us about, at L'Oreal, which is such an aspirational company, how you're coming at this whole question.
Yes, thank you. Good morning still to everybody. Thank you for having me. I think, at L'Oreal, we have achieved a minus 73% carbon reduction in our operations.
Say that again. Wait, I don't think people heard. Say it one more time.
Since 2005, we have reduced our carbon emission in our operations by 73%.
73.
Yeah. While our production raised by 33%. And I think so we are the living proof that business growth and sustainability go perfectly hand in hand. And that's actually something we question a lot when we still have to talk about that, but it seems quite obvious that what is dangerous to company and to business is not sustainability, but is climate change and the consequences. How can we imagine to do good business in the world that is coming up if we do not work on another model? But I would like to say I think part of our success story is that we changed a little bit the narrative around sustainability. What is sustainability? When we talk about sustainability, we very often talk about the catastrophes that climate change is going to bring. But the solutions that we propose sound very often like punishment. They sound like not doing something, not being able to lead a prosperous life and so on. And actually, no, a sustainable lifestyle, the sustainable world that is going to come up if we do what is necessary to do, that's going also to be a beautiful and aspirational lifestyle. That's the world we want to live in. And I think we have to have a positive narrative. And that's what we are trying to do at L'Oreal. We said when we work about sustainability is as aspirational, as beautiful as when we work on our products. It is as glamorous, as desirable. And that brought all employees on board. And I think this is also the way how we will mobilize society more.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Let me ask you something. You said backstage something that really I had never heard anybody say before, and I've been in this field for a long time. Somebody said there's a scarcity versus prosperity kind of mindset. And you said something about scarcity that I hadn't thought about in terms of the status quo actually leading to scarcity. Can you just say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, scarcity for us is going to world that we are heading to if we are not working on climate change, as water scarcity for our clients, water scarcity for our consumers. We are not going to be able to do business in a society that is going to be completely destroyed, where we are going to have conflict. So the question is, how can business still question this, and how can we have still to talk about that sustainability is good for business? Yeah.
Awesome. Give her a round of applause. When you think about L'Oreal, I think the number 2 in the world performer when it comes to carbon. That's pretty amazing stuff. But now, we have a song in the United States, which of these things is not like the other? You are the mayor of Houston, a city in Texas. Houston is the energy capital of the world. I think the protesters were probably trying to find you. What is the mayor of Houston, Texas doing at a green conference? You got hit by a big storm. How is your city doing, and why are you so committed to climate solutions in Houston, Texas?
Because the mayor of Houston, Texas, believes that climate change is real, believe in the science. That's true. The city of Houston is a part of the C40 cities. I also co-chair, along with Mayor Garcetti, the climate mayors of the United States Conference of Mayors. We believe in the Paris Agreement, and as a result, over 400 mayors in the United States have signed on that we are going to do everything that we can to fulfill the tenements of the Paris Agreement. And if you don't lead at the top, mayors will lead from where we are. And that includes places like Houston, Texas. And then the reality is, Van, bear in mind, in the last 3 years, the city of Houston has faced 3 500-year floods. 3 500-year floods in the last 3 years.
Wow.
It is clear. It was questionable whether or not I was going to be able to make it to this conference because there was a system that was forming in the Gulf. And it's not about whether it's a hurricane anymore. You can have a major rain event just from a system that starts. Harvey was a game changer. And I think what we've all learned is that sustainability and resilience go hand in hand. And you can be the energy capital of the world, and at the same time, you can recognize that we need to do a lot to address the climate change for the future, not only of our city, but other cities across the globe. So it's real. And yeah, I'm the energy, it's the energy capital of the world, but the city of Houston is the #1 municipality in the United States on the utilization of green energy, green power in the United States. 80% of our energy for the city of Houston is wind, 10% is solar. Wow. On Earth today, we just entered into a power purchase agreement. We increased our solar consumption from 30 megawatts to 50. We reduced the contracted price by 8%. And over 20 years, we will be saving the city of Houston $40 million. Green power is energy power, and literally, for communities that have been ignored and overlooked for decades in our city, we are transforming and revitalizing communities through the use of green energy. So you can be the energy capital, and at the same time, you can believe in climate change and make some things happen.
Well, I guess you needed a round of applause for that. In the 2 minutes that we have left, I want to just come back to you because that seems like a pretty good sales pitch on green stuff in a red state. But you have to push up against some pretty tough opposition. You're talking about putting a price on pollution, et cetera. How do you sell this message in Canada?
So it always comes back to people. You can't be talking like an economist or someone who's fancy. You have to think about someone who's just trying to put food on the table, get their kids to activities, and is worried about paying their bills. And that's why we talk about why this is good for the middle class, that this is good for people, that there are going to be economic opportunities, there are great jobs. Here we have great Canadian companies that are selling clean solutions across the board, but it's hard. And the one thing I would say as a politician, and I actually am saying this genuinely, we need support. We need support of business leaders like this. Because transitions take time. We've been on fossil fuels for a really long time. We've all benefited from them. And making our way out of them is hard. But a losing proposition is not supporting governments that are trying to do hard things. It is hard. Like every day, I have people who say what we're doing is wrong, that we don't understand, that you're just going to lose jobs. When we have here business leaders who are saying, of course this is a huge economic opportunity. These are the jobs of the future. These are the jobs our kids are going to have, or kids have right now. And so we all have to come together. And that's why I work so hard with cities, with provinces, with states that I'm meeting with here, with businesses, to bring people together. Because what you can see is if you divide people, you're going to get nothing done.
Love it, love it. I'm going to give my business friend the last word in the 30 seconds that we have. You have gone above and beyond, above and beyond. You went to Davos and stood up with Al Gore and put your face in the world and challenged people. Why did you do that? And what came of that challenge you issued at Davos?
Well, that challenge is what I spoke about earlier, Van, where I issued a challenge to companies around the world to step up their commitment to science-based targets. And as I told you, I'm delighted that since then, 39% increase in the number of companies that have committed. The rate of people signing up went from 13 a month to 18 a month. And as I said, it's now 488. But one more commitment I'd like to make, because I issued a challenge to people. But we took on the challenge. You were kind enough to say we are 20 billion. It's not big in America, but we employ 200,000 people who are probably listening now. And what I'd like to do is use the platform you've given me to announce that as far as the Mahindra Group is concerned and all of our 100 companies, I am committing here today on behalf of them that we will be carbon neutral as a group by 2040, 10 years ahead of the Paris Agreement target. And I'd like to know.
Hey.
Wow. Well, that's called a mic drop moment. We can't drop our mics because they're attached to our faces, but if we could, I think he'd have dropped the mic. Give a round of applause to this incredible panel, and thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. All righty.
Great, thanks.
Okay.
Well, our next speaker is known in nearly every galaxy as an acting legend, but he will be the first to tell you that planet Earth is the only home we have. I'm very glad to introduce him as a tireless champion for conservation and an outspoken climate change activist. Please welcome the Executive Vice Chair of Conservation International and recent recipient of its prestigious Founders Award, Harrison Ford.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. You're here, I'm here, because we care. Not just for today, but we care passionately for the future. We know that we only have the possibility of avoiding a looming climate catastrophe if people like us refuse to give up. Conservation International has been working for 30 years to protect nature for people. I've been on their board for over 20 years. We've done some good work in that time, working with others, many of whom are in this room today. We've accomplished a lot, but all of that is at risk if we don't change the path that we're on today. The future of humanity is at stake. While you work to meet the challenge of climate change, I beg of you, don't forget nature. Because today, the destruction of nature accounts for more global emissions than all the cars and trucks in the world. We can put solar panels on every house, we can turn every car into an electric vehicle, but as long as Sumatra burns, we will have failed. So long as the Amazon's great forests are slashed and burned, so long as the protected lands of tribal people, indigenous people, are allowed to be encroached upon, so long as wetlands and bog peats are destroyed, our climate goals will remain out of reach, and we will be shit out of time. If we don't stop the destruction of our natural world, nothing else will matter. Why? Because protecting and restoring forests, mangroves, wetlands, these huge, dense carbon sinks, represent at least 30% of what needs to be done to avoid catastrophic warming. It is, at this time, the only feasible solution for absorbing carbon on a global scale. Simply put, if we don't protect nature, we can't protect ourselves. This is what we need to do. We need to include nature in every corporate, state, and national climate goal. Put in place the plans, the timetables to meet those goals. Invest in mangroves and tropical forests in the same way invest in renewable energy. Work to end the destruction of these ecosystems. Commit to the effort in the next decade to secure them for the future. Pursue research in reforestation like we pursue research in carbon capture and storage. Set a goal to cut costs and increase scale dramatically. Empower indigenous communities to use their knowledge, their history, their imaginations, our science to save their heritage and their lands, respect and ensure their rights. Educate and elect leaders who believe in science and understand the importance of protecting nature. Stop, for God's sake, the denigration of science. Stop giving power to people who don't believe in science, or worse than that, pretend they don't believe in science for their own self-interest. They know who they are. We know who they are. We are all, rich or poor, powerful or powerless. We will all suffer the effects of climate change and ecosystem destruction, and we are facing what is quickly becoming the greatest moral crisis of our time, that those least responsible will bear the greatest costs. So never forget who you're fighting for. It's the fisherman in Colombia, the fisherman in Somalia, who wonders where their next catch is coming from and wonders why the government can't protect them from a factory fishing from across the world. It's the mother in the Philippines who's worried that the next big storm is going to rip her infant out of her arms. It's the people right here in California, people on the East Coast, people in California who are fleeing from unprecedented fires. People on the East Coast are facing the worst storms in recorded history. It's our own country, our own community, our own families. This is the core truth. If we are to survive on this planet, the only home any of us will ever know, for our climate, for our security, for our future, we need nature. Now, more than ever. Because nature doesn't need people. People need nature. So let's turn off our phones, let's roll up our sleeves, and let's kick this monster's ass.
Hi, everybody. I wish I could be with all of you at this remarkable gala, but I want to take a minute to thank all of you, business leaders, scientists, teachers, inventors, for all that you are doing to lead us forward on climate. With each year that goes by, we see a more intense and urgent preview of our future if the climate keeps changing faster than our efforts to address it. And this summer was no different. It makes me think of something Governor Jay Inslee once said: we are the first generation to feel the impact of climate change, and the last generation that can do something about it. That conviction is why I made climate change a priority while I was president. We more than doubled production of clean energy like wind and solar. We set the first ever nationwide standards to limit the amount of carbon pollution that power plants can dump into the air our kids breathe. We changed the way we consume energy, from the cars and trucks we drive to the homes and businesses in which we live and work. And at the same time, we led around the world, working with China and India and dozens of other countries to set ambitious climate targets. Those efforts led to the Paris Agreement, an agreement that will delay or avoid some of the worst consequences of climate change. Obviously, the United States is now the only country on Earth that doesn't belong to the Paris Agreement we helped forge. And that's a tough position to defend. But here's the thing. The Paris Agreement was never going to solve the climate crisis on its own. That's up to all of us. Presidents can set goals and priorities, but it's up to everyone else to do the work required to meet them. And that's why your leadership is so important. The 17 governors and 400 mayors who've committed to upholding the Paris Agreement. The climate trailblazers, activists, engineers, farmers, marine biologists, who are fighting climate change around the globe. Every single passionate, idealistic young person who's marching and organizing and demanding action because they know there's such a thing as being too late, and they're determined not to let that happen. They're determined to build a better future. You're about to meet some of these young people right now, and it should inspire you and spur you to action. Thanks so much, everybody. Take it away.
And now, please join me in welcoming Amita Lagum, Rizalat Khan, and Bernice Dapa.
Thank you. We are here today because we cannot wait any longer. As the ones who are going to inherit this planet, our generation has the biggest stake in this fight. The most to gain, the most to lose. Growing up, there was a stream in my village, Dure, northern part of Uganda. It was there that I learned to swim with friends, while mothers fished and fathers fetched, or vice versa. The people of Acholi and other inhabitants of Dure village lived off of this stream. Now, 14 years later, my grandmother tells me that this stream that once was our lifeblood is now a hazard. Dry in the sunny seasons and a flood in the wet seasons. Climate change is not a far-fetched concept for my people. It is an absurd reality. We actually believe ourselves to be the protectors of the planet, custodians of the earth. It is with this burden I share with you today, not for the restoration of that stream, but for the lifeblood of future generations of the world.
We're confronting problems from different angles, and we're solving new problems with different issues. I grew up in Ghana, where bamboo is found in abundance. Years ago, I was looking at how I can make a difference in life. So I came up with a new initiative called Ghana Bamboo Bikes Initiative. For now, we've created employment for women and young people in our country. They are producing hundreds of bicycles every month. We're just not harvesting bamboo, but we are also cultivating bamboo to feed the industry and to also create another source of economic empowerment for farmers. As we can see, bamboo contains a lot of oxygen that balances the carbon dioxide. We're also promoting sustainable cycling that reduces carbon emissions from the atmosphere. I'm just one of the young entrepreneurs around the globe trying to see how best we can find new solutions to champion climate change mitigations. Together, we make a progress. Thank you.
But we're on a clock, running out of time. I come from Bangladesh, a land of rivers. The river is powerful. It provides bounty, but it can also take it away in an instant, like it did for so many people last year, this year. When I was flying here, I looked down at the rivers crisscrossing the Sierra Nevada mountains. Many just narrow channels, unassuming. The landscape around them was harsh and barren, stricken by heat and drought. The current political times feel like that. We're surrounded by unforgiving mountains of obstacles. But the river, it persists. It flows with single-minded determination to reach the ocean, its mission. If one path is blocked, it finds other ways. It cuts through mountains, even when sometimes it only can chisel away. We must be like the river. Cut through the mountains of obstacles that we face on climate. There are many, but we know the solutions and we know what we have to do. We have heard that for the last 2.5 years. So we need to reach that ocean of hope with single-minded determination to preserve our only home. Let's be the river. Let's bend the curve in the next 24 months. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, starting in a few minutes, Vice President Mike Pence attends the Republican Party's fall dinner in Indiana.